1 second. All right, I'm ready.
Okay. Greetings, 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 greetings. As always, it is I, your king, King Clifford Jefferson. I sit at the Godfrey, the fifth caravan Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I'm the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which we know as Jesus Christ. I have, as always, by my side Archbishop Belmont of the Third Temple English Church of England. We greet you in the name of our ancestors, our forefathers, and our heirs and descendants. I greet you in the name of my Queen, Sister Galveston from the House of Galveston. I greet you in the name of King Edward the Peaceful, which is our risen Christ. And I greet you in the name of the Third Temple English Church of England, which is the beacon light for all those who are striving to know self. So with that, I digress. I'll let our bishop make his entry and we get on with this marvelous lesson.
Greetings once again, brothers and sisters within the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion. It is I, Archbishop Belmont from the illustrious noble house of Belmont. And I'd like to give honors to our creator, as well our king, Clifford Jefferson from the Royal House of Plantagenet, our queen, Lisa Jordan from the Royal House of Galveston, to our members, trustees, heirs, successors, the loyal subjects amongst the realm, and to all the other loving brothers and sisters amongst the four corners of the world who are ready to accept the information that us English heirs lost here in the so-called American colonies, which is actually the British American colonies, who are ready to have salvation brought to us by our Christo, King Clifford Jefferson. Today is June 30th, 2974 of the Berber calendar, which is equivalent to your 2024 Gregorian calendar. And like we say here at the Third Temple English Church of England, it is a beautiful time to be alive. For those of you who just now have an opportunity to hear our voice, we come to you in peace. This information is not meant to hurt anyone, but it is known to cause some type of unsettling feelings within those of you who have been succumbed to live a life of delusion and illusions that is not actually meant to serve the higher you. Once again, many of us have been brought into a system that has nothing concrete for our salvation moving forward in the future, especially when it comes down to the preservation of the people. For those of you who don't know anything about the Dred Scott case, you know that the case itself said that the United States was not meant for so-called melanated people to be so-called citizens. So if that's the case, then only way for you to have any type of rights or privileges or benefits that's truly meant for you, you need to go back to who you were prior to the creation of the United States Corporation. And so far, many of you still want to play within the realm of the United States, which is nothing more than a monopoly, a game. So if you want to play that game, know that it was set for you to lose. And losers don't think you really have a way to go home once you actually bit the hand that fed you. And in this case, we're speaking about our king. So once again, we welcome you in peace. I'll digress and leave the rest of the intro to the king for this marvelous lesson. And for those of you who are really, really ready to hear some amazing information, please open up your ears, open your eyes, clean your heart, because it's going to be needed for you to be able to ascend to the higher realms. I digress.
Well said, Archbishop. As always, it's always beautiful when you give the birthday date 2974. It's nothing like knowing, who you are and what you are and how it came to be. It's very important because a lot of people want to be us. You know, a lot of people actually want to be us, and we're gonna show you some evidence
Yeah.
of people, want to be us but can't be us, and it's meaningless to identify with something that you know nothing of. Okay, all right, and I'm gonna let the teachings do the lesson, do the lessons, do the teachings. You still with me, Archbishop?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, I'm gonna let the teachings do the lesson, the lessons do the teaching. All right. So all those who are here, at the Third Timothy Church of England, please, please make sure that you subscribe. Okay? Because a lot of us subscribe to content unbeknowing that the content which we subscribe to is not worth subscribing to. All right?
Exactly.
And I'm going to show you exactly. All right? People who you subscribe to, which you shouldn't subscribe, are subscribing to us for information that they still to subscribe to steal the birthright. Okay? People just like us. Not only do we have to deal with the Northmen who stole it through the time of the Norman conquest, not only do we have to deal with it from the perspective of those who got the information, which are the Scottish monarchs who created what we call the history regards to Great Britain, which was established in 1707. Not only do we have to deal with the American colonies who incorporated the laws that stem from Great Britain, which is nothing more than laws dealing with slavery. But yet we have to deal with our own people misusing, misguiding the information that was preserved for our illustrious return to the estates. Okay? So Archbishop has been upset about this gentleman, which we're going to expose today. And I think it's only fitting that we show you how important it is that you subscribe to the Third Temple English Church of England. Because if not, then you're at the whim of those who write your book. And you know, we always say, he who writes your books sets your timeline. Time never was when we were not. The life of time began, the time will come where you will be no more. Okay, so look at what we got to show you about the people who are ill-informed, are unconscious, or not cognizant about themselves. All right, but claiming to be conscious. All right, you don't have an excuse. They have an excuse, but you don't. Okay,
Exactly.
those who are listening to the sound of me, Archbishop, you don't have an excuse. They do. So let's look at those who don't have an excuse, then take a look at those who don't have an excuse and those who do have an excuse. All right. So let's take a look at those who do have an excuse, because ignorance is bliss. All right. Check it out. I don't know if you all heard of this gentleman. His name is called Brother Truth. Bear with me. Greetings, greetings, Sister Middleton. Greetings to you. Welcome. All right. This is a 508 incorporated private corporation that was incorporated as under the term I self law and master. Okay? I self law and master. The brother's name is Brother Polite. Okay? That's his name. It says, welcome to our private online academy. I self law and master, estate planning, nationality, and consumer law. Join today. Okay? Join today. This is read a little bit about Brother Truth. Okay? Let's just read a little about Brother Truth and the information that he's teaching that don't belong to him. It actually belongs to the Third Temple English Church of England based upon the pre-establishment laws that were set up by our forefathers that deal with estate planning, nationality, and consumer law. Okay? We're going to show you the difference, all right? Which is not private online academy. It's a public government functioning social compact. So it has nothing to do with anything that you can acquire online. It has something to do with a political society, which he is not. Let's just read a little bit. Archbishop, I want you to narrate a little bit. Read this right here. Everybody listen.
It says, "Welcome to I Self Law and Master University. I Self Law and Master is a 508c1a private unincorporated assembly. Membership is subject to the rules and regulations of associations and or ministry entities. Our ministry and website members are a private member assembly. We merely believe in the right of man to have open discussions and to conduct research on our system of laws in the effort to help one another understand how to deal with legal situations more effectively through education and association with other members. At I Self Law and Master, we freely discuss and support the concepts of a right to counsel, free speech, and free associations as provided by the Constitution. We provide a forum for open discussion and sharing among free living men and women which cannot be regulated. We do provide education for our members and teach them how to be more effectively assert common law solutions to resolve matters. Therefore, we do not give legal or tax advice, nor can we be held liable for any outcomes from the use of this information or the actions taken by the user or participant in this website."
Did y'all hear what they just said? Did y'all hear what he just said? They're teaching you about nationality, estate planning, consumer affairs, but whatever they teach you, they are not going to be held liable if you use this stuff in the public. Did they just what they just say, Archbishop?
Sure did. It's on their website.
All right, so let's just scroll down a little bit more and see what services this man provides. We're not talking about the brother. We're just providing it's public. Right? We're not going to stay long on this. I just wanted to show you. Not just this guy does it, but everybody else does it. They sell packages. All right? Public citizens, private nationals. Now look at the stuff they cover. Codes and statutes. Constitutional protections. Public licenses. Private identification. Taxable citizens. Tax exempt. But they just said, whatever you learn on this online course, they are not going to be held liable if you use this information out in the public. Did they just say that?
Yep.
Go ahead, Archbishop.
Caveat emptor, buyer beware.
Buyer beware. Free delivery, general delivery. www.iselflawmaster.com. Go to it if you don't believe us. All right, let's just go down a little bit more. Estate planning, equity in law, enforcement of your rights. So that means that why are they saying that they're not going to help you in court if this matter comes in court when they're saying to help you enforce your rights? They should be there to assist you if they're the one who's teaching you. Exactly. That don't make no sense, especially when they're dealing with consumer law, all right, and business enterprise. They teach all this, estate planning. All right. Look, I mean, they make it look all nice and fancy to attract you. You know what I'm saying? You know, we as human beings act off impulse, stimuli. You know what I'm saying? Not realizing that we want to right into the lion's den. All right. You in the lion's den, and he ain't gonna sit and play with you like a mouse. He gonna eat you. For dinner, let's see. Membership levels. Look at this, y'all. Freshmen, sophomore, junior semesters, all online. Give you identification cards. All this they provide. It gets better. Membership packages. Depth of status correction and what it means. English common law versus Roman military law. Estate planning, equity law, creating trusts for asset protection, consumer laws and how to enforce them. He claimed to know this. How to sue a creditor. They just said they ain't gonna help you in court, but they're gonna teach you how to sue them. All right, if they're gonna teach you how to sue them, they should be in there assist you if they know it's gonna work. They don't even know it's gonna work. Consumer repair, auto rescission, car discharging, how to set up your religious assembly and tribal government and everything you need to protect your estate. They're trying to tell you and show you how to set up a government, but they said they ain't gonna be there to assist you when shit go down. Come on, y'all. Y'all got to be more conscious than that. And they have an excuse. You don't. It gets better. Look at it, y'all. Look at the membership prices. He teaches in British, France, all online classes. All right, all online. He ain't never gone to these places, but he have online classes for ignorant people who are in British, France, North America, and wherever else he's doing these online services. Okay, just look. Passports. This guy is providing passports online. So that means that he's on the acting on the diplomacy level. He's got more authority than the what's his name? For the United States Minister of Affairs. He has more diplomatic staff than the Minister of Affairs, who has the right to set up embassies around the world. So he's telling you he has that power. Yet he said, when you get in trouble trying to use information, they're not going to be held liable. Let's just look.
This is why we tell you, brothers and sisters, your common sense is needed. You know, everything that's better than that gold.
Priority packages. All right? International driver's permit. Look at this stuff. It gets better, y'all. It gets better. He got books out. Look at the prices. Full-time students, $1,300, $25 a month for the next month. Part-time students, honorary students. Honorary in what? Come on, y'all have to be smarter than this. Y'all got to be smarter than this. All right? So all this stems from his so-called knowledge in the common law. Let's show you where he's getting it from. First of all, let's see who all fell subject to this man bamboozleism. Let's see who all fell subject. Let's see. All right. This man is a mess. Look at the many people who have an excuse. They have an excuse for their ignorance. You who are at the third tip of English Church of England don't have an excuse.
Like we said, we're not creating anything new. We're going back to the old way.
There we go. Let's see. Let's see his members. Who he ain't coming to help out when they get into trouble. You might see yourself in this list. Look at him, y'all. Look at these people. He's speaking on behalf of all these nationalities. How are you giving out a nationality when they already got nationalities? How are you doing that? And these people are none the wiser. These are grown-ass people. Grown-ass people.
Can't change your national descent. You can't change who you come from. You are what you come from.
Some got their real names, some got made-up names.
And then the fact that you're utilizing the English language, but yet know nothing about the English history, the English law. You know, there's rules in how you utilize names in the English world or in the Kingdom of England. In America, you can use however you feel fit. You remember, however your imagination decide to work, they don't care as long as you don't infringe on nobody else's imagination. But
Mm-hmm.
in a kingdom, in the real world, there's rules to keep things in order.
Well said, Archbishop. Now look all the people who are a part of this man's society, who are members, who are paying all this money for these packages, but as soon as they start to use it, they are not coming to your rescue. Because ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Non comus mentes. All right, look at them. They even got a Jefferson up here, got a Morris up here. So he don't discriminate. Like United States don't discriminate, like Scotland don't discriminate, like British don't discriminate. They do not discriminate when it comes to making money. Okay? They got to make money. Let's look. Look at all these brothers and sisters that are lost. No background checks on none of these people. You probably got molesters, criminals, drug dealers, everything in there, especially if you're looking for a benefit. Especially if you're looking for the benefit. These people are looking for a benefit. They trying to get out of a jam. They're trying to escape a responsibility in lieu of their affiliation with some type of government. Because this organization is private, not public. Okay? Not a republic, not a commonwealth, private. Look at all our brothers and sisters. Don't have a clue. With great power comes great responsibility. You got Europeans up here, Arabs up here. God, not that I'm discriminating. I'm just showing you what the man got. Everybody's here for the same service that this man provides. And we know when you provide a service, you have to be paid for your service. All right? He's not held liable for the service he provides. That's just doing business with you. All
Mm-hmm.
right?
This is all commerce.
All commerce. Moors, everybody up here. I was watching that guy the other day. Now I'm just playing. I'm just playing. All right, we about to move on. Look up. Carmen King. A child up there. His man don't care. He got a child up there. I keep going on. I'm just going to show him. He right here, smack in the middle. Look at him. Right there. Chief Kalani House of White. That's the gentleman right here who started this initiative. Okay, and enslave all our brothers and sisters all over again with information that don't belong to him. He even got another Jefferson, Chief Farrell Jefferson Hall, House of Jefferson. How? How is this man able to do this and the people not realize what the hell is he doing? Why? How? Let's see how. Let's go here. And we're going to move from here. Let's look at his students, his teachers. All right. These are the private tutors. Let's see if they're up here before I move on. Members in the assembly. Let's see. Okay. Ain't nothing new under the sun. This is what we do. We expose. All right, let me just go here. Let me just show you this. This is how we've been exposing this guy. We've been exposing this guy.
Now, point of interest, you have the freedom to do whatever you choose. But once again, every choice comes with a consequence.
Mm-hmm. Look at this. We didn't see anything on there about the Kingdom of England in which we just read. But yet this man has the nerve to sell ID cards for members who are not even English. Everybody see this, right? Nationality cards.
Now, he
Nationality
states
cards.
that there is no king when the king has been back here for years. We have been on this platform religiously stamping our claim, letting you know who we are. And instead of coming to us, you rather try to create something of your own and to think that these brothers and sisters are going to have salvation in the true English church based off of what you're bringing them. It's not going to happen. The issue is it's too many minds occupying that one body. People claiming to be Indian, they claiming to be this, they claiming to be that. You got to be born again.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you claiming to be Indian and also claiming to be a descendant of the Kingdom of England all at the same time? Now, we're not saying that the so-called indigenous blood for those people over here aren't in us, but we don't have their laws. We don't have any record or any customary practice or anything that our ancestors that we know in the last 200-300 years were utilizing that can save us beyond what the English history that we already verified within us can do. And we all can say within the last 50, 60 years that we was all part of the church and may have been a Protestant church, but we know the Protestant origin goes back to the Church of England, which got its origin from the English church after they came and incorporated when they came and brought Augustine Canterbury in 597.
Well said. Well said.
So we know these invaders have been coming constantly, time in and time again, you know, taking our customs, our practices, everything about us, utilizing our language too, and yet don't give us the credit. And like the king said, there's nothing new under the sun, so history just repeating itself. And the same people who came in the kingdom via the Norman conquest were melanated people who look just like us.
Mm-hmm. And this gentleman doing the same thing.
So so-called pale-faced people, they're not the ones who got an issue with. The ones we got an issue with look like us.
Look like us. Exactly. Because the pale one, or what you call white, are the ones telling the truth.
Exactly. They're the trustees of the information.
Preserve the information. All right, so you can't hide this. Look what else this guy is doing. You're also selling license plates from the Kingdom of England. Now, throw one of these on the side of your car, on the back of your car, and see what happens.
Because they know they broke away from the king. So if you to call yourself an Englishman, where's your king?
Because he ain't a king. He never said he was no king.
He said he's a chief.
You got to be on the king's land to be called an Englishman. All right, you got to be on the why? Because if it's the common law, then you got to go back to the common people who had the common law, and they were Englishmen and women. That's why you got to go to what we call the English Enlightenment. We're going to talk about that. I just want to finish with this fool. Okay. Now we're showing you how we expose him that he must be studying our information. How we know it? Let's show you some more proof. Bishop Searcy put his butt on blast. Check it out. We came up with the term Anglo-Saxon Berbers.
Yeah, no one else put that connection together until King Clifford Jefferson brought it.
If you go to TikTok and look up Brother Truth, you'll see this Anglo-Saxon. It's telling you that once there was no king, right? He's saying there was no king, but yet the rich are out there that were preserved for the king. Now able for you to be used. And he said, for those call themselves Anglo-Saxon Berbers. The name Anglo-Saxon Berber never even came up until we at the Third Timothy Church of England brought that name up. All right? We brought that name out. How we know it? Bishop Searchy got right on him and said this. Read that for Archbishop.
All right, so this is something I actually wrote in Bishop Cersei's share. I said, no one was saying Anglo-Saxon Berber until King Clifford Jefferson from the Royal House of Plantagenet, the Christ for us English people. Visit the Third Temple English Church of England on YouTube for more truth and to meet the de jure English king via agnetic succession.
Okay, so we got the proof to prove that we are in fact and indeed the government that expresses the wishes for the English people under the English common law. All right, we're going to clearly verify this today and show you that whoever this guy is, he's a fraud. He's a fraud, and we will be coming for you, Mr. Brother Truth. Okay, so enough with you. Let's get on with the marvelous lesson. Greetings, Bishop Searchy from the House of Searchy. All right, let's first talk about establishment. Everyone know what establishment means, because when you establish something, that means to affirm it, to attest it, that it in fact exists. All right, so let's look at the word the establishment. We can define the word establishment, but just look at the word the establishment, how it's used by these who claim to be the elite. Okay, where they're not the elite. We are, in fact, the elite. Yes, us here at the Third Timothy English Church of England are the elite. We are the elite society, that body of politics that incarnated, right, through what we call establishment. Okay, we're going to show you the establishment clause. You heard of that, right? The establishment clause. First, we're going to look up the establishment, then we're going to look up the establishment clause, which you call the First Amendment, religious freedom, which Brother Truth is not even dealing with religious freedom because he's a private organization. He don't care about your religious freedom. He only care about making that money. All right? It's very important. And look how many people just not just associated with his group, but all the other groups around the world that our people are subject to. All right? You don't have a winning chance if you're not a part of the Third Temple English Church of England. Let's prove it.
And point of interest also too, for those of you who claim or looking to finally accept your English ancestry, the English people couldn't practice under any other so-called doctrine regarding so-called religion. You know, so if you claim to so-called be English, you couldn't practice under Islam. You know, you couldn't practice under Judaism. As even though King Edgar the Peaceful took the Christian subjects in, but he didn't say that they were Judaized Christian subjects, nor did he say anything about Islamic subjects. He said the Christian subjects of the realm.
Well said, Archbishop. Okay, so let's define the establishment, what it means to us at the Third Timothy Church of England, because you can just throw that word around. We know the word establish means to make firm, okay, to establish something, okay? That guy established, like everybody else wants to establish something, but what purpose was the establishment created? All right. If it's new, that means it's just beginning. Our establishment was already here, and we only latching on to that which was already firm and in place. Okay,
Exactly.
we're going to prove it. Just look at the word, the establishment. We're going to be going back and forth because we have a lot of information to cover. Read that for Archbishop.
All right, it says in sociology and in political science, the term establishment describes the dominant social group, the elite who control a polity, an organization, or an institution. In the praxis of power, the establishment usually is a self-selecting, closed elite entrenched within specific institutions. Hence, a relatively small social class can exercise all socio-political control.
Did you hear that? So we don't expect to be a bunch of people, because this is going to be a small movement, all right, a selective movement, an established intellectual movement of citizens, of peoples, of members, of mass of people. That's what we're trying to represent. That's what we do represent. Why? Let's see. Let's go right here to Ireland, UK. Read that for him. Can you see that, Archbishop? United Kingdom.
Says the United Kingdom has numerous entrenched groups that are regarded as forming the establishment. These include the royal family, the aristocracy, the landed gentry, prestigious public schools like Eton College and Harrow School, the Privy Council, senior civil servants, lawyers, academics, Church of England, clergy, financiers, industrialists, the armed services, and other professionals.
Okay, just look at the United States. Just get an idea.
In the United States, the term the establishment typically refers to the two-party political system in which the Republican Party and the Democratic Party usually are perceived as alike in their anti-labor policies, pro-federal policy, and defense of corporate interests. The usage refers to the original coinage of the term the establishment in 1955, referring to the intricate matrix of power and connections among corporations, politicians, government agencies, and some social groups. The establishment also referred to white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, which are called the WASPs, constitute much of the social elites that have dominated historical American society, culture, and politics, enjoying education, voting rights, and land ownership. In the 1950s, the New Left criticized the WASP hegemony of American society. Some prominent American families have held disproportionate wealth and wielded disproportionate political power over the decades. Experts talk about what C. Wright Mills called the power elite, and about leadership, communities, and policy areas such as foreign policy.
Okay, so we see that North America, under the Establishment Clause, became the elite, which were called white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, which are those who colonized North America by way of the Jewish or Scottish diaspora. All right, the Scottish diaspora. All right, and as we know that these are the power elite that they call the establishers. All right, now we're going to show you that we are in fact the elite, the establishers. Why? Because we're going to go back to the Establishment Clause of the United States of America to validate that. In the United States,
the establishment, all right. In the United States law, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, together with that amendment's Free Exercise Clause, formed the constitutional right of freedom of religion. The Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause together read, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The Establishment Clause acts as a double security, prohibiting both control of the government by religion and political control of religion by the government. By it, the federal government of the United States, and by later extension, the governments of all U.S. states and U.S. territories, are prohibited from establishing or sponsoring religion. The clause was based on a number of precedents, including the Constitutions of Clarendon, the Bill of Rights 1689, and the first constitutions of Pennsylvania and New Jersey. An initial draft by John Dickinson was prepared in conjunction with his drafting the Articles of Confederation. In 1789, then Congressman James Madison prepared another draft which, after discussion and debate in the first Congress, would become part of the text of the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. The Establishment Clause is complemented by the Free Exercise Clause, which allows individual citizens freedom from governmental interference in both private and public religious affairs.
Okay, so I don't know if this is what Brother Truth was trying to do or any other society out there was trying to do. But you can't do this without some type of affiliation with the government, which to us is our religious society. We know that church and state is separated based upon the Constitution. We know that prior to that separation of church and state, it was a church state, which was what we call, what they call fusion of power. Okay, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch. All right, and we know that the Establishment Clause, which you call the First Amendment, was based upon other precedents, and the first one they mentioned was what? The Constitution of Clarendon. All right, the Constitution of Clarendon was created by Henry II, son of Godfrey the Fifth, Caliban Jew, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. Then the Bill of Rights of 1689, which goes by the House of Stuart, which created through what we call the Bill of Rights. These are the British Scottish minority. Then the Articles of Confederation, and then Pennsylvania and New Jersey's Constitution. All right. So you gotta who was the president? Who was the first establishment of the what we call the elite? It says the Constitution of Clarendon. Who created the Constitution of Clarendon? That's us. Let's read it for ourselves. Read that, Archbishop.
The Constitutions of Clarendon were a set of legislative procedures passed by Henry II of England in 1164. The constitutions were composed of 16 articles and represent an attempt to restrict ecclesiastical privileges and curb the power of the church courts and extent of papal authority in England. In the anarchic conditions of Henry II's predecessor, Stephen, who reigned in 1135 to 1154, the church had extended its jurisdiction by taking advantage of the weakness of royal authority. The constitutions were claimed to restore the law as it was observed during the reign of Henry I in 1100 to 1135.
Okay, y'all remember that Henry I is the son of William the Conqueror, who invaded England. All right, and we said that Henry II, the son of Godfrey the Fifth, Caliban Jew, where we here at the Third Timothy Church of England has incorporated based off that Establishment Clause, the Constitution of Clarendon. The purpose and intent of that Establishment Clause and our incorporation was based upon the purpose and intent of why they created the Clarendon Constitution and what was the purpose and intent for that. Let's read it. Read it for him, Archbishop.
The Constitution.
Hold on. Okay, read it. Go ahead.
The Constitution's primary goal was to deal with the controversial issue of criminous clerks, or clergy who had been accused of committing a serious secular crime, but were tried in ecclesiastical courts by benefit of clergy. Unlike royal courts, these ecclesiastical courts were strictly limited in the punishments to which a convicted felon could be subjected. In particular, the spilling of blood was prohibited. An ecclesiastical case of murder often ended with the defendant being defrocked, dismissed from the priesthood. In a royal court, murder was often punished with mutilation or death. The Constitution.
Okay, one second, Archbishop. I think I missed it. Right here. Okay. All right. So Archbishop stated that in the anarchic conditions of Henry II and predecessor, the church had extended its jurisdiction by taking advantage of the weakness of the royal authority. It's very important to understand the Constitution of Clarendon, which was the precept for the First Amendment right here in North America, which you call the Religious Freedom Clause. Okay, so what was the anarchic conditions for the purpose and intent of the Constitution of Clarendon, which is the precedence for the establishment, all right, that was created by the elite. And we know the elite was Henry II, okay? That was the elite. His father, Godfrey the Fifth, Caliban Jew, he was the elite. And they made these decisions based off anarchic condition. So what is the anarchic condition? Let's see the intent of why they were created. Read that from Archbishop. Watch the trail of events that we expel as we teach this class.
The anarchy The anarchy was a civil war in England and Normandy between 1138 and 1153, which resulted in a widespread breakdown in law and order. The conflict was a war of succession precipitated by the accidental death of William Adelin, the only legitimate son of King Henry I.
1 second. Bishop Searcy, that's great. That's great. All right. Yeah, he needs to come on here and explain his situation. All right. So as we see, the anarchy was the intent of why the Clarendon Constitution was created in the first place. All right. And it started because of the white ship. Henry II's son, William Adelin, died in what we call the white ship, which resulted in the marriage between Empress Matilda and Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, ruler of Jerusalem. Okay, so the Constitution of Clarendon, which is where the establishment call was based upon, has everything to do with us here at the Third Temple English Church of England. We can see that because Archbishop just read. He just stated the anarchy was a civil war in England and in Normandy between 1138 and 1153. It's very important because we're gonna go through that history right now. Okay, and you know we are these people because we're explaining this history that Brother Truth cannot explain.
Mm-hmm.
He can't explain this history. Let's prove it. All right, let's prove it. Let's start with archbishops about the English diaspora. Read the first paragraph.
The English diaspora consists of English people and their descendants who immigrated from England. The diaspora is concentrated in the English-speaking world in countries such as the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, South Africa, India, and to a lesser extent, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and continental Europe. Sound like the Four Corners to me.
Yeah, so English diaspora was a diaspora of the English people. Okay, English people misnomer English, but we know we are Anglo-Saxon Berbers. All right, because we know the first English speaking king came in with William the Conqueror. That's why there was an English diaspora. All right, that's the reason why there was an English diaspora because Northmen invaded England, which was composed of Anglo-Saxon Berbers. We call them Black Anglo-Saxon, contrast to white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. We hear that because the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants established their establishment clause, what they call the First Amendment. All right, we already had an establishment clause going back to the presence of the Clarendon Constitution, which goes back to the English diaspora, which was composed of Anglo-Saxon Berbers or melanated Berbers. You can call them African, you can call them black, you can use whatever term you want to, but we are Anglo-Saxon Berbers with a darker complexion. We want to know why? Let's read it. Origin of the diaspora. Let's read it for ourselves. We just be going hit and miss it. We ain't going to stay too long on these topics because we got a lot of ground to cover. Go ahead.
All right, it says the first notable exodus of English speakers. Now, when they say exodus, meaning we left.
We left. You hear that, y'all? We left.
So the first notable exodus of English speakers began in the years following the Norman conquest of England. That's the year 1066. The majority of them being aristocrats and their retinues who had become dispossessed of their manors and titles by the invading Normans. Some went to neighboring lands in Scotland, Ireland, and Scandinavia, but many fled to the Byzantine Empire, where they were said to have settled in an area they named New England along the Black Sea, like Crimea, and garrisoned a castle called Kibotos on the coast of Anatolia. The emperor's Varangian guard then became mostly Englishmen.
Okay, all right, so we just got that. Just check this out. Now, that's very funny because we said that the English diaspora started with who they said? William the Conqueror.
William Conqueror.
Okay, all right, so if it started with William Conqueror, let's go back here to Freeholder. On New Jersey courts. Read the first two paragraphs.
It says New Jersey alone, of all of the United States,
1 second, 1 second. Go ahead.
Has the distinction of retaining the title of freeholder to denote,
I'm sorry, Archbishop. Go ahead.
it's okay, King, to denote the elected members of the county governing bodies. This descriptive name, which commemorates the origin of home rule, is used by the only 21 of the nation's 3,047 counties. In other states, these county officials are known as commissioners, supervisors, probate judges, police jurors, counselors, and a variety of other names. An Old English term, a freeholder, originally denoted a person who owned an estate of land over which he had complete control. After the Norman conquest of 1066 AD, British kings found it necessary under pressure to call together an assemblage of higher clergy, earls and barons of the nobility, and later knights of the realm, to sit as advisors and to grant taxes for defense of the kingdom. By the 13th century,
That's good. So it says by 1066, when William the Conqueror invaded England, there were freeholders prior to that in there. There were freeholders in England prior to the William the Conqueror invaded England. All right. We know that the English diaspora was a result of William the Conqueror invaded England, and we had to leave our homeland, which was called England. All right. Ain't no ends buts about this. All right. Why? Because we're going to qualify so there can be no confusion that we at the Third Temple English Church of England are in fact Anglo Saxon Berbers. Let's prove it. All right. Where we at? Let's go to William the Conqueror. Read that first paragraph.
Says William the Conqueror, sometimes called William the Bastard, was the first Norman king of England, reigning from 1066 until his death. A descendant of Rollo, he was Duke of Normandy as William II from 1035 onward. By 1060, following a long struggle to establish his throne, his hold on Normandy was secure. In 1066, following the death of Edward the Confessor, William invaded England, leading an army of Normans to victory over the Anglo-Saxon forces of Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings, and suppressed subsequent English revolts in what was known or has become known as the Norman Conquest. The rest of his life was marked by struggles to consolidate his hold over England and his continental lands, and by difficulties with his eldest son, Robert Curthose.
Okay, so we see that the Norman Conquest was the result of William the Conqueror. William the Conqueror descended down from who? Rollo. From the House of Normandy. So let's look at his predecessor, Rollo. Read about Rollo.
Rollo was a Viking who was a Count of Rouen, became the first ruler of Normandy, a region in today's northern France. He emerged as a leading warrior figure among the Norsemen, who had secured a permanent foothold on Frankish soil in the valley of the Lower Seine after the siege of Chartres in 911. Charles the Simple, king of West Francia, granted them lands between the mouth of the Seine and what is now Rouen in exchange for Rollo agreeing to end his British swearing allegiance to him. Brigadage, swearing allegiance to him, religious conversion, and a pledge to defend the Seine's estuary from other Viking raiders.
Okay, so we see Rollo was, as he said, was a Norseman and a Viking. Okay, he was a Norseman and a Viking. So that means William the Conqueror was the Norseman and a Viking. So those who invaded England was Norsemen and Vikings. Can we agree, Archbishop?
Agreed.
Okay, and we understand that when we're dealing with the Doomsday Book, which William the Conqueror created, it was a record of all the feudal or tenure states, which we call the states of the land, of a recording of all the land that he took by way of force, which was called prescription. Everybody better listen to that term, which we call prescription. All right, so let's look up the word Northman.
The Norsemen were a North Germanic linguistic group of the early Middle Ages, during which they spoke the Old Norse language. The language belongs to the North Germanic branch of the Indo-European languages and is the predecessor of the modern Germanic languages of Scandinavia. During the late 8th century, Scandinavians embarked on a large-scale expansion in all directions, giving rise to the Viking Age. In English language scholarship since the 19th century, Norse seafaring traders, settlers, and warriors have commonly been referred to as Vikings. Historians of Anglo-Saxon England distinguish between Norse Vikings, Norsemen from Norway, who mainly invaded and occupied the islands north and west of Britain, as well as Ireland and western Britain, and Danish Vikings, who principally invaded and occupied eastern Britain. Modern descendants of Norsemen include the Danes.
That's fine. Let's go right here. Right here. Last part. Right here.
The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, written in Old English, distinguishes between the pagan Norwegian Norsemen of Dublin and the Christian Danes of the Danelaw. In 942, it records the victory of King Edmund I over the Norse kings of York. The Danes were previously subjected by force under the Norsemen for a long time in bonds of captivity to the heathens.
Okay, so we see that the Edmund I defended the territory against Vikings, and we know William the Conqueror was a Viking because he descended down from Rollo, who was Northman and who was of Frankish descent. All right, it's very important. And they invaded England. Very important. Prior to that, it was called Britannica, or what we call Albion. Why? That's very important. Albion is very important because archbishop is always referring to Albion. All right, so we're going to discuss that. Let's go here. House of Normandy, because Rollo is from the House of Normandy, right? William the Conqueror from the House of Normandy, but they were all Vikings, all right? Northmen, Vikings, all right? Very important. You must understand that. Not like the Anglo, because you have the term Anglo-Norman. Two different distinctions, all right? Anglo-Norman is the purpose and intent for why they call it Anglo-Norman. We're going to see why. Read this for Archbishop.
The House of Normandy designates the noble family which originates from the Duchy of Normandy, and whose members were Dukes of Normandy, Counts of Rohan, as well as Kings of England following the Norman conquest of England. It lasted until Stephen or Stefan of the French House of Blois seized the Duchy of Normandy in 1135. The house emerged from the union between the Viking Rollo, first ruler of Normandy, and Papa of Bayeux, a West Frankish noblewoman. William the Conqueror and his heirs down through 1135 were members of this dynasty.
That's enough. Okay. So we see that William the Conqueror and his heirs were all descended down from these Vikings, starting with Rollo. All right. And we know that these Vikings or Northmen invaded England. Very important for you to understand that they invaded England. This is why we come up with what we call the Doomsday Book, because all the records that were created and filed for the record was called or filed by what we call deeds, feudal tenure estates. That's why it's called feudal tenure lands. Who gave it out? The king. Mm-hmm. All right, we've seen it. It says called terra regis. It's the king's land. It's part of the royal domain, which is called crown land, and crown land is contrast to fee simple. Crown land is intel land, which cannot be separated from the heirs. Okay, we must understand that Brother Truth don't have a clue about what he's teaching. How we know? Let's just find out. Let's go back here to the common law. Since he still knows so much about the common law, this is on New Jersey Court of Law.
Being one of the original 13 colonies, New Jersey has been strongly influenced by English law and the Anglo-Saxon tradition. The three branches of government enshrined in the U.S. Constitution and in the New Jersey Constitution are derived from English history. The king was the executive branch, Parliament the legislative branch, the courts the judicial branch. It was in the English judiciary that a formal civilized system for resolving disputes and addressing crimes originated among English-speaking people. It was in the early courts in England that the common law took root and it evolved into our current system of courts, judges, and juries. The common law we know today dates back to the 12th and 13th centuries and derives from the reign of King Henry II, who appointed judges to resolve disputes among his subjects.
Stop. Okay, so we go back to the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause. The Establishment Clause was based upon the presence of the Clarendon Constitution, which was created by King Henry II, the son of Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, the son of folk, the ruler of Jerusalem. And at that time, it was a fusion of government formed by the executive, legislative, and judicial branch. There's the proof right here. New Jersey court, you can look it up right there. And they're going all the way back to King Henry II, going back to the Establishment Clause, which is the power of the elite, contrast to the power of the elite that the white WASP, what we call WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant had, which were the ones who stole the history pertaining to the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. The same thing that Brother Truth is doing, and he's supposed to be a brother. He's supposed to be our own brother, and he's doing exactly what these people did to us. How we know it? Let's just prove it. Right? The proof is in the pudding. Okay. Let's go back here. King Edgar's council at Chester. This is why we refer to King Edgar as our Jesus Christ, because he kept those Vikings in check. He kept them in check. Let's find out King Edgar's council and see who made up of his council. Just the first paragraph. That's all we need.
King Edgar the Peaceful's council at Chester took place in AD 973, shortly after Edgar's coronation at Bath. What happened at Chester had been heavily obscured by the embellishments and political environment of later 12th century chroniclers. However, it is claimed that several kings came and pledged their allegiance to Edgar, including Kenneth II of Scotland and Malcolm I of Strathclyde and Fife from Wales. The chroniclers wrote that these kings pledged their faith that they would be Edgar's liegemen on sea and land. Later, chroniclers made the kings into 8, all plying the oars of Edgar's state barge on the River Dee. Such embellishments may not be factual, and what actually happened is unclear.
All right, let's go a little bit further. Now, it said, including Kenneth II of Scotland and Malcolm of Strathclyde. Now, we know that William the Conqueror descended down from Rollo, and Rollo was a Northman, and he was a Viking, okay? And we know that Kenneth II was a son of Malcolm I, all right? And they all pay homage to King Edgar the Peaceful. King Edgar the Peaceful was the son of Edmund I, and Edmund I was the oldest son of Edward the Elder, the son of Alfred the Great, okay? This is history at the highest level, all right? Who was Kenneth II? Let's just read to make sure I ain't just making stuff up. Read who this guy was.
Of Kenneth McMalcolm, anglicized Kenneth II, named the fratricidal, was King of Alba from 971 to 995. The son of Malcolm I, he succeeded King Cullen on the latter's death at the hands of Roderick ap Defnwall in 971. The Chronicle of the Kings of Alba.
Read from here. Right here, 973.
In 973, the Chronicle of Melrose reports that Kenneth with Malcolm, the king of Strathclyde, Maccus, king of very many islands, and other kings, Welsh and Norse, came to Chester to acknowledge the overlordship of the English king, Edgar the Peaceable, at a council in Chester. It may be here that Edgar regulated the frontier between the southern lands of the kingdom of Alba and the northern lands of his English kingdom. Cumbria was English, and the western frontier lay on the Solway. In the east, the frontier lay somewhere in the later Lothian, south of Edinburgh.
Okay, that's cool. So all these kings met at Chester to pay homage to King Edgar the Peaceful, all right? And we know that even Kenneth II, who was the son of Malcolm, he was the king of Alba. And we know Alban is a Scottish corruption of the word Albion, which takes us to Albion, because it shows you that all these kings pay homage to who? King Edgar the Peaceful, which was our Jesus Christ. All right? This was God's son. All right? It was our Jesus Christ. So let's go all the way back to Albion to prove this. All right? Let's prove it. Very important. Think it right here. Albion.
In 930,
Oh, sorry, right here.
Albion is an alternative name for Great Britain. The oldest attestation of the toponym comes from the Greek language. It is sometimes used poetically and generally to refer to the island, but is less common than Britain today. The name for Scotland in most of the Celtic languages is related to Albion, Alba in Scottish Gaelic, Alban in Irish, Nalban in Manx, and Alban in Welsh and Cornish. These names were later Latinized as Albania and Anglicized as Albany, which were once alternative names for Scotland.
Very, 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 very important. So watch where we go with this at the Third Tip English Church. This comes from studying. Okay, we just heard that all those Viking kings gave homage to who? King Edgar the Peaceful.
Peaceful. Mm-hmm.
All right, they gave homage to King Edgar the Peaceful, and these ones who gave homage to King Edgar the Peaceful were the descendants of who? William the Conqueror.
Mm-hmm.
William the Conqueror invaded England, but they still held up English laws.
Yep.
When Edward the Confessor died, who took over? William the Conqueror.
The Conqueror.
And all that William the Conqueror had in the Doomsday Book, he passed over to who? The Plantagenet crown.
Plantagenet crown.
Yep. Right? Over what we call the House of Normandy. Okay? Y'all better follow the rabbit hole. It gets even deeper. All right? So we see Albion. Because we're talking about those Northmen, those Vikings, who all paid homage to King Edgar the Peaceful. And Kenneth II, son of Malcolm I, was a king of Alba, because Alba is the Scottish term for the Greek for the word Albion. Okay? For the word Albion. So let's go down to the attestation or the establishment of the word Albion, because we know establishment or the attestation means to prove. All right? It means to prove. Let's prove it. Read that. We're going to go right here. $9.30. Read that for Mark Bishop.
In 930, the English king Ethelstan used the title Rex et Primicerius Totius Albionis Regni, king in chief of the whole realm of Albion. His nephew Edgar the Peaceful styled himself in 970 Totius Albionis Imperator Augustus, August Emperor of all Albion.
Now, why did he do this? We know that King Edgar the Peaceful was the emperor at Albion, and all the Northmen who invaded England gave homage to who existed there prior to their invasion. We know that King Edgar the Peaceful was the oldest son of Edward the Elder, the son of Alfred the Great, who was married to Elizabeth, and we all those were melanated entities, beings, right? You can call them black, African, whatever you want. We're calling them Berbers, all right? And they were melanated Berbers. How we gonna prove it? So we see that in those days there were giants in Albion. All right, let's prove it. Very important that we read this and not look over this aspect. All right, because we go to Brutus Chronicles or Brutus of Troy, which are stories or narratives created based off folklore, myths, and not given the true narrative of where the story stemmed from. All right. So just look at this picture, because I've been going and reading this article for quite a while now and never realized the depiction that they gave in this picture. So let's see if y'all see what I see. Okay. Look at the face of that giant, Archbishop.
Which one? To the left?
To the left. What's his face?
It look like they try to
That's
gray it
black
out.
right there. That's all black. You got a white one right here with a beard, and this one is black.
Yeah, definitely the hands are definitely dark skin too. You
Dark skin
see,
hands.
and then you look at the faces over there on those on the ship.
In the ship, all black faces.
Dark skin, yeah. And then yeah, like they was trying to remove their colorings too.
All right. And if you look down here, you got all maidens. And they got a little bit of colorization to them as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And
It
this is
does.
the Brutus of Troy story. All right. Which was a narrative given or created to take away from the true narrative, which is called Brute Chronicles. All right. So we talk about Albion. We talk about Albion, which was the true name of that land before it was invaded through what we call the Scottish diaspora, which gave birth to the Scottish Enlightenment. Because when they came over here, they stole our land because they were what descendants of what they call Northmen or Vikings. The proof is right here. You can't dispel it. Let's go further. Brute Chronicle, right here. This is called the Brute Chronicle. Since we're reading the Brutus of Troy story about giants in Albion, and we know that 1 second. Yeah, so we're reading about the Northmen. We're reading about they invaded England. We know that these ones who invaded England gave homage to the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. All right, whether they were giants or not is left for discretion. But as we can see in the depiction, there were giants in what they called Albion, and we know that when you look at the biblical story, it said the giants was on the earth and it took the women of the earth, or something like that. Ain't there something like that in the narrative of the biblical
It
story?
says that the angels came down and they had children with the women, and
With the
the
women.
children were giants.
Yes. All right. So that story might have something to do with that because right here we're reading the Brutus of Troy story and they make reference to Wycliffe Bible. Okay. We know Wycliffe Bible was one of the first Bibles created. Read this first paragraph, Archbishop.
It says the first Anglo-Norman versions end with the death of King Henry III in 1272. Subsequent versions extend the narrative. 50 versions in Anglo-Norman remain in 49 manuscripts, in a variety of versions and stages. Latin translations of the Anglo-Norman versions remain in 19 different versions, which fall into two main categories. Some of those were subsequently translated into the Middle English. There are no fewer than 184 versions of the English translation of the work in 181 medieval and post-medieval manuscripts, the highest number of manuscripts for any text in Middle English, except for Wycliffe's Bible. The sheer number of copies that survive and its late 14th century translation into the vernacular indicating the growth in common literacy. It is considered central to the literary culture of England in the late Middle Ages.
That's very important that we understand that because the Brute Chronicle, in regards to Albion, all right, it says the Brute Chronicle, also known as the Prose Brute, is a collective name of a number of medieval chronicles of the history of England. The original Prose Brute was written in Anglo-Norman and was subsequently translated into Latin and English. This is very important because we went back to what we call the English diaspora. Okay, the English diaspora is very important as a result of the Norman invasion. Okay, we know when the Norman invasion is when William the Conqueror and those Northmen called Viking invaded England, which brought off the phrase Anglo-Norman. Just look up Anglo-Norman just to qualify. Anglo-Norman language.
Anglo-Norman, also known as Anglo-Norman French, was a dialect of Old Norman that was used in England and to a lesser extent other places in Great Britain and Ireland during the Anglo-Norman period. According to some linguists, the name Insular French might be more suitable because Anglo-Norman is constantly associated with the notion of a mixed language based on English and Norman. According to some, such a mixed language never existed. Other sources, however, indicate that such a language did exist and that it was the language descended from the Norman French, originally established in England after the conquest.
Okay, that's very important for you to understand because they're showing you that prior to the invasion of William the Conqueror and his descendants, we were all together grouped into one category, Anglo-Saxon Berbers. Why? Because we all existed here within what we call the Anglo-sphere. The Anglo-sphere, we know the Anglo-sphere control what we call the English overseas possessions. Once again, the Anglo-sphere controls or contains what we call the English overseas possession. So this brings me to the best part of this lesson that I've been waiting on. So let's prove it. Here we go. All right, this is where it gets interesting. This goes back into yesterday's lesson. All right, this goes back into yesterday's lesson. African presence in the 13th century. All right, dealing with the Doomsday Abbreviator, which was a smaller collection of what we call the Doomsday Book. All right, and we know the Doomsday Book was created by who? William the Conqueror. All right, it was created by William the Conqueror. Read the first paragraph, Archbishop.
The Domesday Abbreviado, also known as the Exchequer Abbreviado, and the National Archive, is one of the three condensed abbreviated versions of the Domesday Book produced in the 13th century. The Domesday Book was the survey of England ordered by King William the Conqueror in 1085, principally to find out who owned what land and the resources so that the king could levy taxes.
Did y'all hear that? Everyone needs to understand that because this is the Doomsday. Doomsday means the day of judgment. Okay? The day of judgment. I don't care where you got it from, you got to prove that you had the right to possess that land. All right? Mm-hmm. That's why it is recorded. Read the next paragraph.
It says the survey covered 37 counties and named 13,418 places in about 2 million words. Within it, the Domesday Book gave the names of landholders in each county, the manors that each landholder owned, their values and names of their subtenants, and the names of many boroughs as well as details of their customs. It has also included the number of freemen and others in each manor, and the resources available including land taxable uses, plow teams, livestock, mills, and supporting equipment and buildings.
Okay, so there was a record kept in regards to the Doomsday Book of who owns what. Movable property and non-movable property. We must understand what's going on. Why? Let's go here. Early evidence, what is this called? The early evidence of African in Great Britain, right? Because we know that in the Doomsday Book, when we go here, where is it at? Colors and illustration. Read this.
The Domesday Abbreviado is sumptuously illustrated, a document fit for a king. The initial letters or capitals of each county are picked out and illuminated in gold, red, and blue, with illustrations of the kings, archbishops, bishops, barons, earls, and many mythical beasts. The entry for each county opens with the Terra Regis, the king's land, with its capital letter beautifully painted. The size, coloring, and detail
of
the letters.
You're gonna read all that. We start here.
Okay.
Right. Read this last paragraph and the paragraph on the capital.
It says the capital letter for the entry for Derbyshire has a man of African descent holding onto a letter I. Its coloring and size indicate that it is the opening letter to an entry summarizing the king's property in the region.
Okay, so it's a man of African descent holding on to the letter I. The coloring and size indicate that it is the opening letter to the entry summarizing the king's property in that region. All right? Very important. Now let's read this next paragraph.
An African presence, an African man in the 13th century England. Why might the abbreviado feature an image of an African man? Like many other islands, Britain has a long record of migration, which dates back thousands of years. An African presence can be specifically dated back to the migration to Britain of the Roman Emperor Septimius Severus, who was born in the modern-day Libya. An African presence in Britain dating to around the same time as the Exchequer Abbreviado was discovered when a skeleton was examined by the BBC History Cold Case team. The skeleton was found to have come from a medieval Christian cemetery in the grounds of a monastery in Ipswich. Carbon dating, bone analysis, and DNA tests revealed the man was born sometime between 1190 and 1300 in North Africa and that he had lived in Britain or an equally cold, damp climate for at least the last 10 years of his life. 9 other African skeletons have been found in the Ipswich cemetery, and these people seem to have come from sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay. So there was an African man that was described in the Exchequer Abbreviato based upon the skeleton. There were 9 skeletons found, but one of the skeletons they found was that of a guy that they called was from Ipswich. Very important. So let's click that real quick because we're proving that prior to William the Conqueror coming into Great Britain and conquering England, we were already there. Okay. We were already there. Why? Because Dred Scott Gates is going to qualify that. All right. The Dred Scott case is going to qualify everything we read in here based off this article in regards to a misnomer term African, which is actually people are melanated living in these days and time called the Middle Ages. Okay. Why? Because they got archaeological proof, which is a skeleton that was found in a monastery in what they call Ipswich. All right. Called Ipswich. So it's very important to understand that if you want to prove that we existed before these records that they want to create. So let's go to the skeleton.
And point of interest, also too, based off that article, it did tell you Septimius Severus was Roman and he was melanated.
Yes.
So letting you know, the Romans, the ones who are writing your timeline, the ones who usurping the English people's history, are melanated people. The same invaders who came into the kingdom who worked for Rome were melanated people.
Okay. So it says so it was a skeleton in Ipswich. They call it the Ipswich man. So who is this Ipswich man? Let's just check him out. Let's read about this. Because what's funny about this, these people who study about this man don't know who this man is. We do. We know who this guy is. He's a Berber. He was part of the grave fires. He was one of the Ipswich grave fires, and the grave fires were established by Robert Tifnot, who accompanied who? Edward I in the Eighth Crusade. All right, and where was the Eighth Crusade? In Tunis, Tripoli.
Tripoli.
Where this guy is from. The skeleton is from Tunis. Read it.
The Ipswich man is the name given to the skeleton of a man found at Ipswich, Suffolk, and made the subject of a BBC documentary called History Cold Case. The skeleton was discovered during a series of archaeological digs carried out from 1993 to 2006 for the cemetery of the Greyfriars Monastery in Ipswich, Suffolk. The Ipswich man had been buried there between 1258 and 1300, and through forensic investigation by Professor Sue Black at the University of Dundee, he was found to have direct African, Berber ancestry. This finding challenges the popular idea that the first people of African or Berber descent arrived in Britain in the mid-20th century.
Y'all better listen.
How do we know the Ipswich man was from Africa?
Right here, read it right here.
Oh, why was the Ipswich man in England? It is likely that the Ipswich man came from modern-day Tunis and North Africa. This is for a number of reasons. Firstly, the Greyfriars Monastery where the Ipswich man was buried was built by Robert Tiftoft. Tiftoft was a colleague of Richard de Clare, and both men went on a crusade together in 1270. Payments for their activities during the crusades are recorded in the pipe rolls. Papers written in the Latin recorded expenditure. And in the Florus Historium, a medieval history, it states that de Clare brought 4 captive Saracens with him to England from Tunis in 1272. It may be that the Ipswich man was one of those 4 because of de Clare and Tiptoft's relationship.
Okay, so let's clear this up. He was not a Saracen, y'all. He was a Berber. All right, we're going to prove it. They're not sure. We sure. He was a Berber. Let's prove it. All right, so it says that this man found in Ipswich Monastery and was a part of what we call the grave fire, because we know the grave fire was started by who? Robert Tifnot. We know that the actual fires themselves was a Franciscan order. All right, but it said that this skeleton bone found originated in the 12th century. Okay, and it said that the skeleton bone found was an African man or melanated man originated from what we call modern day Tunisia. And it said that Richard D. It said Tifnot was, where is that? It said, um, firstly, the Great Friars Monastery where the Ipswich man was buried was built by Robert Tiftot. All right, talking about an African man. When you say African man, we're talking about a melanated man. When we're talking melanated man, we're talking about a black skinned man. Not a white skinned man, but a black skinned man in the Middle Ages, y'all. All right? In the Middle Ages, we're validating our story before they told us our story existed, because that's who we represent. We represent the Anglo Saxon Berbers. And we know Tunis is a territory that was inhabited by Berbers. How we know? Let's prove it. Ipswich Grey Friars. Read that, Archbishop.
Ipswich Grey Friars was a medieval monastic house of friars manor or Franciscans founded during the 13th century Ipswich, Suffolk. It was said conventionally to have been founded by Sir Robert Tibbet of Nestlefield, Suffolk, before 1230 to 1298, but the foundation is accepted by Knowles and Hadcock to be set back before 1236, and therefore be Sir Robert's time. This makes it the earliest house of mendicant friars in Suffolk, and established no more than 10 years after the death of St. Francis himself. It was within the Cambridge custody. It remained active until dissolved in the late 1530s.
Okay, so the Ipswich Grey Friars was established by Robert Tiftot or Tifnot, and we see that the Grey Friars was a part of an order established by what we call the Franciscans, because there are three sets: Grey Friars, White Friars, and the Black Friars. Okay, they were called the school, Black Friars, Grey Friars, and White Friars. We're not gonna get into that. We talked about it in prior lessons, but just for the sake of the argument, we know that the Ipswich man was an African man from Tunis, was part of this Grey Friars. Why it's very important. So if he was part of the Grey Friars in Ipswich, let's just go into the history of what we call Ipswich, because it's very, very, very important to find out why this African man, misnominated African man, was over there. Okay?
Exactly.
Why was he over there? Let's look up Ipswich. All right, this is Ipswich. Read right here.
It says after
hold on. This is before the eighth crusade, all right? In the 13th century. We're going back to Ipswich before the eighth crusade, and look what they're going to talk about, since we're talking about Ipswich.
After the invasion of 869, Ipswich fell under Viking rule. The earth ramparts circling the town center were probably raised by Vikings in Ipswich around 900 to prevent its recapture by the English. They were unsuccessful. The town operated at mint under royal license from King Edgar in the 970s, which continued through the Norman conquest until the time of King John in about 1215. The abbreviation Gips appears on the coins.
Okay, so we say in the 869, Ipswich fell under Viking attack. We know those Viking attacks were the descendants of predecessors of William the Conqueror, because William the Conqueror descended from Vikings, i.e. Rollo. Ain't that what they said?
Yep.
Rollo was a Norseman Viking, and we know prior to Rollo lived in this time, and he was invading England at the time of King Edgar the Peaceful and his descendants. All right, it said right here, after the invasion of 869, Ipswich fell under Viking rule. The earth's ramparts circling the town center was probably raised by Vikings in Ipswich around 900 to prevent its recapture by the English. So they was already invading it, and we kept defending it against those invasions. They said they were unsuccessful. The town operated and meant under whose license? King Edgar the Peaceful license, which are our Jesus Christ, which continued through the Norman conquest until the time of King John. King John was the grandson of Henry II, the son of Godfrey the Fifth Count of Anjou, son of Philip, the ruler of Jerusalem. You got hear what I'm saying? Do you hear what we're saying here? We're showing you a line genealogy going all the way back to the kings of Wessex, ending up with the Plantagenet crown against those Vikings, William the Conqueror and his descendants, because he, in fact, indeed was a Viking. He, in fact, indeed was a Northman. And all those Northmen, Vikings, paid homage to who? King Edgar the Peaceful,
Edgar the
because they were a
Peaceful.
part of his council when they rolled him down the River Dee. All right? How many know this history that good? None of y'all. All right, I ain't finished. Let's get with it. Okay, Ipswich. Let's go back up to the front. Read the first paragraph of Ipswich. Because we know that a black monk of African descent or melanated descent, because to me, African and melanated means the same thing. Of melanated descent was living in a territory called Tunis at that particular time. All right, and this was in the Eighth Crusade. That was really originally called the Crusade of Edward the First. All right, it was Edward the First Crusade. Right, he helped Louis the Ninth, who was a Frankish king. All right, he was a Frankish king, but they were invading, help assisting the kings of Plantagenet king against invasion from Sunni Muslims, not Berbers, but Arabs. Okay, we're going to prove it. All right. That's why when that Ipswich man was brought to Africa, he was a part of the monastery of the Greyfriars. All right. Because they understood that was a part of what we call the English Benedictine reform. Yes, they were a Benedictine reform. Let's read it. Ipswich. Read that.
Ipswich is a port town and borough in the county of Suffolk, England. Ipswich is the county town of Suffolk and is the largest settlement in the county, followed by Lowestoft and Burystaff, Street, Esmond. It is situated in East Anglia.
That's enough. Okay, so Ipswich is what does it say? It's a county town of Suffolk, and it's the largest settlement in the county, followed by Lowestoft and Bury St. Edmund. And it said that Ipswich was defended by King Edgar the Peaceful against those Viking invasions and the time King Edgar the Peaceful was ruling. Okay, he himself was fighting against keeping Vikings out, and he had a peaceful reign. So how in the hell was he able to do that? We're gonna find out. Let's see. All right, let's go to Bury St. Edmund. Let's read a little bit about that. Let's go to the most important aspects of Bury Edmund, because we know Bury Edmund were descendants of King Edgar the Peaceful. Let's prove it. Start right here. Hold on. Yeah, right here. History. Hold on. Let me find it. Hold on. Let me find it. Right here. 942.
In 942 or 945, King Edmund I had granted to the abbot and convent jurisdiction over the whole town, free from all secular services, and Canute in 1020 freed it from episcopal control. Later, Edward the Confessor made the abbot lord of the franchise. The older monastery was destroyed, and the secular priests having been expelled, a new Benedictine abbey was built. Count Alan Rufus is said to have been interred at Bury St. Edmund's Abbey in 1083. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the head of the De Hastings family, who held the lordship of the manor of Ashiel in Norfolk, was hereditary steward of this abbey.
Okay, so it's very important that Ipswich was an important town for the kings of Wessex. All right, going all the way back to Edmund I to King Edgar the Peaceful. Why? Because King Edgar the Peaceful was the son of who? Edmund I. And Edmund I was the brother of who? Edward the Elder. All right, let's see. Edmund I. Let's just pull him up. You got to know who these people are if you claim to be an Englishman. Brother Truth. Read this.
Edmund I was king of the English from October 27, 939 until his death of 946. He was the elder son of King Edward the Elder and his third wife, Queen Eadgifu, and grandson of King Alfred the Great. After Edward died in 924, he was succeeded by his eldest son, Edmund's half-brother Ethelstan. Edmund was crowned after Ethelstan died childless in 939. He had two sons, Eadwig and Edgar, by his first wife Eogifu, and none by his second wife Ethelfled.
Stop. Okay, so we know that Alfred the Great, Edward the Elder, Athelton, Edmund the First, King Edgar the Peaceful were all family members. Okay, and at that time they were invading themselves against Vikings. All right, against teachings that were not based upon our teaching. That's why there was a reformation of the Benedictine monastery. Okay, very important to understand why we reformed it again today. That's why we incorporated based upon the establishment that was created through our ancestors' incorporation of their laws, which we call what? The common law of England. Because the true foundation layer for the common law of England was who, Archbishop?
Oh, Henry II, going back to
Who,
King,
uh, who, who set the standard for his common law of England?
King Alfred the Great.
All right, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, all right. So we understand that this Ipswich man, which is an African man from Tunis, was found in a monastery in Greyfriars, Ipswich. We know Ipswich was a territory inhabited by King Edgar the Peaceful and his descendants, his predecessors, which were constantly fighting against Viking invasion. And we know those Vikings that were invading that land that was being protected goes all the way up to William the Conqueror. And when Edward the Confessor died, that's when they made their entry into the land. All right, bringing in what they call Anglo-Norman, the Anglo-Norman language. All right, here in the Anglosphere, because we know that Vikings invaded North America. How we know it? Let's prove it. Let's go to the Dred Scott case, because William the Conqueror was a Northman. He invaded England. All right, they passed that on to Scotland. Scotland passed it on to the colonies, and the colonies passed it on to what you call the states. You want to hear it? Let's read it from the case. Let's go right to the case. Right to the case. Dred Scott case. You can't run from this. The Norman conquest. They knew now in the time of Chief Justice Taney about the Norman conquest. This is why Frederick Douglass got on Chief Justice Taney, excuse my French, ass, because he knew that Chief Justice Taney knew who were the real slaves. They were the real slaves. How we know it? Dred Scott case is going to tell you. Read what it says, Archbishop.
It says the public law of Europe formerly permitted a master to reclaim his bondsman within the limited period wherever he could find him, and one of the capitularies of Charlemagne abolishes the rule of prescription. He directs that wheresoever within the bounds of Italy, either the runaway slave of the king or the church, or of any other man shall be found by his master, he shall be restored without any bar or prescription of years. Yet upon the provision that the master be a Frank or German or of any other nation foreign, but if he be a Lombard or a Roman, he shall acquire or receive his slaves by that law which has been established from ancient times among them, without referring for precedents abroad or to the colonial history. For similar instances, the history of the Confederation and Union affords evidence to attest the existence of this ancient law. In 1783, Congress directed General Washington to continue his remonstrances to the commander of the British forces respecting the permitting Negroes belonging to the citizens of these states to leave New York, and to insist upon the discontinuance of that measure. In 1788, the resident minister of the United States at Madrid was instructed to obtain from the Spanish crown orders to its governors in Louisiana and Florida to permit and facilitate the apprehension of fugitive slaves from the states, promising that the states will observe the like conduct respecting fugitives from Spanish subjects. The committee that made the report of this resolution consisted of Hamilton, Madison, Sedgwick, Hamilton's Works 473, and the clause in the federal constitution providing for the restoration of fugitive slaves is a recognition of this ancient right and of the principle that a change of place does not affect a change of condition.
Did you hear that? So don't care if you're over there, over there, or over here. The condition of slavery does not change. Why? Because those laws of slavery were incorporated in the colony by Great Britain, who instituted. And William the Conqueror, through the Norman conquest, has not made any changes from the day of the conquest to King George III in the present. All right, let's prove it. Read it right there. Before you read it, let me read the comment from Brother Truth. Reply. Bishop Searchy reached out to him. He said, I have nothing to prove, Queen, to each in their own. I'm not here to be anybody's king, nor do I care to be. Just a good brother doing the work of the ancestors. I appreciate being the topic of the day. Anyone's discussion, which just further let me know I'm right on the right path. You mean to tell me I got a king and spend a whole hour discussing me and my movement? I'm honored and tell him I give thanks. I appreciate the teaching and work you all do. Keep enlightening the people. You see the bull crap? Y'all see the bull crap? He's trying to he don't want the responsibility, but yeah, he want he want to give honor to those who are doing the work. But you still in the work. You undermining the work by what you're doing, Brother Truth. Thank you, Bishop Searcy, for reaching out to him. But I bet you don't want to do no website. I bet you don't want to do no lecture. Keep working on them, Bishop Searcy. Keep working on them. You there, Archbishop?
I'm here, King.
Okay. So it said the orders of William the Conqueror that a residence of any of the surveilled population of England for a year and a day without being claimed in any city, borough, wall, town, or castle of the king should entitle them to perpetual liberty and a specimen of these laws. Who was he talking about? Who was William the Conqueror talking about? That any person not claimed was free.
He was talking about the freemen who was there prior to them
prior to him coming on there and enslaving them. Okay, we must look at the proof. Let's go a little further.
Because those who came with William the Conqueror was his property.
Check it out, y'all. Dred Scott Case is talking about William the Conqueror.
So this goes to show you that those folks in those positions of power today, of authority, they know this information. They know your history and they know it better than you do. So when you come into court and claiming to be all these different identities, in their mind, they're just laughing at you because they know you have no idea who you are. And so when you come in here and want to be Indians or want to be this and want to be that, that's cool for them because they're just going to continue to keep using you as a slave.
Read this.
It says, the question to be raised with the opinion of Lord Mansfield, therefore, is not in respect to the incongruity of the two systems, but whether slavery was absolutely contrary to the law of England. For if it was so, clearly the American laws could not operate there. Historical research ascertains that at the date of the conquest, the rural population of England were generally in a servile condition, and under various names denoting slight variances in condition, they were sold with the land like cattle and were part of its living money. Traces of the existence of African slaves are to be found in the early chronicles. Parliament in the time of...
Y'all hear what that just said? So they're talking about Africans being in the slave at the time of the conquest. Historical research ascertained that at the day of the conquest, the rural population of England was generally in servile condition, and those under those various names denoted slight variances in condition, they were sold with the land like cattle and were a part of its living money. This Dred Scott Case said it right here. Did Brother Truth tell anybody about that? No. Why? Because he still wants them to be under that same status and servitude. Okay? But he's just being the master. He said he don't want to be king. Because then he got to be held responsible. He told you on his website that if anything goes down, don't hold me responsible. Don't hold us responsible. Why? Because we don't even know if this shit gonna work. That's what he's saying. He don't even know if it's gonna work. Continue.
It says, traces of the existence of African, aka Berber slaves, are to be found in the early chronicles. You know what chronicles those are. We just read them. Parliament in the time of Richard II and also of Henry VIII refused to adopt a general law of emancipation. Acts of emancipation by the last named monarch and by Elizabeth are preserved.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Henry VIII refused to adopt general laws for emancipation. Henry VIII, all right? Not just him, but King George III. We're going to read it. Continue.
The African Berber slave trade had been carried on under the unbounded protection of the crown for near 2 centuries when the case of Somerset was heard, and no motion for its suppression had ever been submitted to Parliament, while it was forced upon and maintained in the unwilling colonies by the Parliament and Crown of England at that moment. 15,000 Berber slaves were then living in that island, where they had been introduced under the counsel of the most illustrious jurist of the realm.
Where we at, Emma? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
And such slaves had been publicly sold for near a century in the markets of London. In the northern part of the Kingdom of Great Britain, there existed a class of over 30,000 to 40,000 persons, of whom Parliament said in 1775, that's underneath George III, many colliers, coal heavers, and salters are in a state of slavery or bondage, bound to the collieries and salt works, where they work for life, transferable with the collieries and salt works when their original masters have no use for them. And whereas the emancipating or setting free the colliers, coal heavers, and salters in Scotland, who are now in a state of servitude, gradually and upon reasonable conditions, will be the means of increasing the number of colliers, coal heavers, and salters to the great benefit of the public, without doing any injury to the present masters, and will remove the reproach of allowing such a state of servitude to exist in a free country. And again, in 1799, they declared that many colliers and coal heavers still continue in a state of bondage. No statute from the conquest till George III had been passed upon the subject of personal slavery.
Did y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that? From the Norman conquest to King George III, no laws in regards to truly emancipating the slaves was initiated. Why? Because slavery was incorporated in the colonies. How we know? Dred Scott Case is going to say it. Continue on reading that one.
Says these facts have led the most eminent civilian of England to question accuracy of this judgment, and to insinuate that this judgment, the offense of ampliare jurisdiction by a private authority, was committed by the eminent magistrate who pronounced it.
You hear that? Who pronounced it? Let's get some more meat. Check this out. It gets better, y'all. It gets even better. Now we're going to talk about, they knew that the power was in the crown. We know that under the world domain, under crown land, all crown land was subject to the loyal power of the king. And at that time, under the Norman conquest, that king was William the Conqueror. Okay? That king was William the Conqueror. So all power and authority was in the hands of the king. Read this part.
Says, but the recognition of a plenary power in Congress to dispose of the public domain or to organize the government over it does not imply a corresponding authority to determine the internal polity or to adjust the domestic relations or the persons who may lawfully inhabit the territory in which it is situated. A supreme power to make needful rules respecting the public domain, and a similar power of framing laws to operate upon persons and things within the territorial limits where it lies, are distinguished by broad lines of demarcation in American history. This court has assisted us to define them in Johnson versus McIntosh. They say, according to the theory of the British Constitution, all vacant lands are vested in the crown, and the exclusive power to grant them is admitted to reside in the crown as a branch of the royal prerogative.
Read that again.
It says, according to the theory of the British Constitution, all vacant lands are vested in the crown, and the exclusive power to grant them is admitted to reside in the crown as a branch of the royal prerogative.
Okay, so I don't give a damn what the what you teaching people about an estate. It ain't no real estate. I'm trying to tell you that now. Even Chief Jeff Taney had that sense to understand that all land, but all land. So if you talk, what estate you talking about? If it ain't the clearest estate or the best state you can have in any estate is what we call land. All right. And we see that land we talking about based off the royal domain is called crown land. And that land only belongs to heirs. And you are not an English heir, brother. All right. Nor any person who's on your platform are English heir. The only English heirs that are out there that are members of the Third Temple English Church of England. Why? Because that was based upon the Establishment Clause as established by the Clarendon Constitution. Okay? Religious freedom. This is our religious freedom based upon our religious government, which is based on our body of politics. Let's read it.
All the lands we hold were originally granted by the crown, and the establishment of a royal government has never been considered as impairing its right to grant lands within the chartered limits of such colony. And the British Parliament did claim a supremacy of legislation coexistence of with the absoluteness of the dominion of the sovereign over the crown lands. The American doctrine to the contrary is embodied in two brief resolutions of the people of Pennsylvania in 1774, that the inhabitants of these colonies are entitled to the same rights and liberties within the colonies that the subjects born in England are entitled within the realm.
You hear that, y'all? They made a distinction between the rights of Englishmen in the rim and those in the rim that are situated in the colonies, because the colonies were part of the rim. They weren't separate. It was just self-enfeasement. All right? It wasn't part of the royal domain because the royal domain was called crown land. Didn't it just say crown land? Sovereign over the crown land. All right? Anything other than that was based upon self-enfeasement, which is called self-infeudation, which was a violation of law. All right? Let's prove it. Let's get a little further. Page 209. This case is good. I better pay attention. So we know who the land belongs to. It belongs to the crown. We know that if it's crown land, then it belongs to the heirs. But the heirs are all put in a state of servitude all the way back from the time of the Norman Conquest to King George III. And then that slavery was incorporated in the states by Great Britain. Great Britain passed it on to the colonies. You don't believe me? Dred Scott Case is going to tell you. Read it, Archbishop.
That to the position that slavery can only exist except under the authority of law, it is objected.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It is objected that in few, if any instances, has it been established by statutory enactment. This is no answer to the doctrine laid down by the court. Almost all the principles of the common law had their foundation in usage. Slavery was introduced into the colonies of this country by Great Britain.
Ooh, read that again.
It says slavery was introduced into the colonies of this country by Great Britain at an early period of their history, and it was protected and cherished until it became incorporated into the colonial policy.
If y'all don't listen to what Archbishop is telling you, it says slavery was incorporated in this country by Great Britain. We know Great Britain was established in what year, Archbishop?
In 1707.
By who?
By the Acts of Union, by the monarchs of the Scottish monarchs.
Okay, so if that's the case, that means that the Scottish are the ones who enslaved you. We read the Dred Scott Case, ain't we? We're reading the Dred Scott Case, and they're telling you that Great Britain incorporated into the colonies, and it was cherished till it became a part of what we call the colonial policy. Continue to read.
It is immaterial whether a system of slavery was introduced by
You there? One second, we got technical difficulty. Bear with us, y'all. All right, let me pick up until he come back in. Slavery was introduced into the colonies of the country by Great Britain at the early period of their history. It was protected and cherished until it became incorporated into the colonial policy. It was immaterial. One second, everyone. Okay, here we go. You there, big man?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Don't worry about it. Start back from slavery was introduced.
All right, so it says slavery once again was introduced into the colonies of this country by Great Britain at an early period of their history, and it was protected and cherished until it became incorporated into the colonial policy. It is immaterial whether a system of slavery was introduced by express law or otherwise. If it hath the authority of law, there is no slave state where the institution is not recognized and protected by the statutory enactments and judicial decisions. Slaves are made property by the laws of the slave states, and as such are liable to the claims of creditors. They descend to heirs, are taxed, and in the South, they are subject of commerce.
So how in the hell is Brother Truth going to help them out with taxes when the state can't even get out of taxes? So how the hell you going to get the people out of taxes when the state can't get out of taxes itself? That comes along with the package deal. It's called an encumbrance. It's called an easement. All right, so Brother Truth, you don't have a clue about what you're talking about. All right, let's go back to where we at right here. Now we would consider a relationship between the federal government bearing slavery in the state. Let's see who the real criminals. Read, Archbishop.
Slavery is emphatically a state institution.
Is what, Archbishop? What they say it was?
It's emphatically a state institution. Emphatically a state institution. In the 9th section of the first article of the Constitution, it is provided that the migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit shall not be prohibited by the Congress prior to the year 1808, but a tax or duty may be imposed on such importation, not exceeding $10 for each person.
Okay, so this is why you got all these migrants coming in, because they creating new slaves. They got to keep the money coming in. All right? Mm-hmm. That's why Brother Truth can't help you out with taxes, because he's bringing in new slaves, allowing the government to tax you. So if you got taxed as a result of what he teaches you, he can't help you. He's following the program. We at here at the Third Timothy Church of England don't pay tax. I ain't paid taxes in 15 years, and I wasn't even an Englishman at that particular time. I was a Morris American. I at least had that much sense to know how to get out of that, and I still ain't paid taxes. All right, and that's what's going to be the result for everybody here at the Third Timothy Church of England. Why? Because we are tax exempt. Why? Because every tax that can be a tax is called crown debt. All right, so it all belongs to the crown anyway, including you. All the debt you owe belongs to the crown. Okay, you can always also the only person who can discharge that debt is the crown, not Brother Truth, not the government or anybody else he teach you that say he can do it, said they can do it. Continue on. There.
The provision in regard to the slave trade shows clearly that Congress considered slavery a state institution to be continued and regulated by its individual sovereignty, and to conciliate that interest, the slave trade was continued 20 years, not as a general measure, but for the benefit of such states as shall think proper to encourage it.
Right. So as you can see, from the Norman Conquest to King George III to the colonies to North America, and slavery was incorporated inside the state by way of statute. We call that positive law. All right? Mm-hmm. Positive law.
And the
law they create every day.
And then
Go
the
ahead,
fact that they've
Archbishop.
been doing it, I've said the fact that they've been doing it for so long is now considered a customary practice.
Mm-hmm.
They ain't even got to really talk to you about it. All they got to do is just do it.
Mm-hmm. Let Dred Scott show you why they're keeping us in slavery. Let's see why they keep us in slavery. Look what they stated. Read this part.
It says many of the states on the adoption of the Constitution or shortly afterward took measures to abolish slavery within their respective jurisdictions. And it is a well-known fact that a belief was cherished by the leading men, South as well as North, that the institution of slavery would gradually decline until it would become extinct. The increased value of slave labor and the culture of cotton and sugar prevented the realization of this expectation. Like all other
Wait for Archbishop to get back.
all right, sorry about that again.
Don't worry about it, brother.
All right, what part did I leave off at?
Right here. But if we right here,
But,
start right here, like all the communities.
all right, like all the other communities and states, the South were influenced by what they considered to be their own interests. But if we are to turn our attention to the dark ages of the world, why confine our view to colored slavery? On the same principles, white men were made slaves. All slavery has its origin in power and is against the right.
Okay. So we see the reason why we're slaves today as a result of the Norman conquest until this present day. Because he just said back in the dark ages, they were the slaves. Didn't they say that? Chief Justice said, but if we turn our attention to the dark ages of the world, why confine our view to color slavery? When you say color slavery, you're talking about, it didn't say white slavery. It said color slavery. So when you're talking about color slavery in the dark ages, that means that if the white people were enslaved in the dark ages, that meant that the colored people must have been what? Free.
What's the being free?
They
That's the
must have been free. So if the whole discussion in the Dred Scott case is about from the Norman conquest until King George III about passing no legislation in regards to slavery, and we know that it said Great Britain incorporated slavery into the colonies, and it became a part of the corporate policy. That means that it's still going on today.
Mm-hmm.
It's still going on today. Why? Because you're still subject to the identity that was created through what we call the Norman conquest. All
Conquest.
right, by William the Conqueror. And we know William the Conqueror invaded these lands called England or Anglo land. All right, let's cool it as we come to our conclusion. All right, so let's check this out. Going back to the African that was found in Ipswich, and we know Ipswich was a territory governed by the kings of Wessex, Edmund, King Edward the Peaceful, his father Edmund the First, his father Edward the Elder, his father Alfred the Great, and we know all these were melanated people, as they said in Dred Scott case, colored people, and we know that they were not enslaved. We know that they were trying to be enslaved by those Vikings, and those Vikings were the Northmen, and those Northmen was those descendants of William the Conqueror, which Dred Scott Cave was talking about, going back to the Norman conquest, right? Did they
Mm-hmm.
say that?
Yep.
Okay, you can't get no clearer than that. Let's make it clearer. All right, since those don't think, believe us. All right, so we know that this African man who was apparently enslaved, all right, because we know that slavery came when William the Conqueror invaded. But they said that this African back in the 13th century was a part of what we call a grave friar, which was a monastery, a Benedictine monastery under what we call Robert de Tifnot. All right, Robert de Tifnot, and Robert de Tifnot was the assistance of who? Edward the First. So who is this Robert Tifnot? Because we have to associate that African or that colored person with Robert Tifnot. So who was Robert Tifnot? Let's just see. Read that.
Robert De Tit, Lord.
You're breaking up. All right, we're gonna wait for Archbishop to get back again. He's having computer trouble. Here we come now.
He said he was made governor of Nottingham Castle in 1275.
Start from the top, Archbishop.
Okay. Robert de Tiptoft, Lord of Nesselstead, Carbrook, and Langar, was an Anglo-Norman landowner and soldier. Robert was appointed governor of Portchester Castle in 1250 underneath Henry III. I guess that's what it is.
Yeah.
He accompanied Edward I on Lord Edward's crusade to the Holy Land in 1270.
Stop. Okay. So Robert Tifnot accompanied Edward I on Lord Edward's crusade in the Holy Lands in 1270. At the time of Henry III, because Henry III was the father of Edward I. Henry III was the son of Henry II, who was the son of Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, ruler of Jerusalem. And it said that Robert Tifnot, who the African slave in Ipswich was buried in what we call the monastery of Greyfriar, accompanied him. Okay, so we see Robert de Tifnot accompanied Edward I in Lord Edward's crusade in the Holy Lands in 1270. Okay, let's look at what we call the Eighth Crusade. What was the Eighth Crusade about? So we're looking up the Eighth Crusade now. So we know that Robert Tifnot accompanied Edward I in the Eighth Crusade. We know that Robert Tifnot was the establisher of the Greyfriar, where that African monk was buried, which was called the first African from Tunis. All right, very important, very important. So we go. What's up with the Eighth Crusade? Because the Eighth Crusade took place in where? Tunis.
Tunis.
That's where it took place, in Tunis, where this monastery African abbot died at. Okay, or well, originated from. Then he went and was buried in what we call Ipswich. Okay, so we proven that there were melanated / black people in Britain. All right, who were free. And we know based off the Dred Scott case, if we were free, that means that the white people must have been enslaved. You know, white people are associated with those Nordic tribes because it must be the case since the nationality of those who call colonists was based upon the color of skin. Okay? And we know that when we went back to the Establishment Clause, it said that the establishment of the elite society at that time were called white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. It didn't say black Anglo-Saxon. Why? Because we weren't Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Protestant was a result of what we call the English Reformation that was done by Henry VII. Okay? You must know your history. So we're going to go back to the Eighth Crusade. We know the Eighth Crusade was in Tunis. Well, that Ipswich man was found who was of African descent. And if you say African descent, the true way to explain it was that he was of Berber descent. We're going to qualify in a little bit, but he was of Berber descent. Let's read it. The Eighth Crusade. Just a little snippet of it. We ain't going to read much. We're coming to our closing.
It says the Eighth Crusade was the second crusade launched by Louis IX of France. This one against the Hafsid dynasty in Tunisia in 1270. It is also known as the Crusade of Louis IX against Tunis or the Second Crusade of Louis. The crusade did not see any significant fighting as Louis died of dysentery shortly after arriving on the shores of Tunisia. The Treaty of Tunis was negotiated between the Crusaders and the Hafsids. No changes in territory occurred, though there were commercial and some political rights granted to the Christians. The Crusaders withdrew back to Europe soon after.
Okay, so there was a crusade in against by Louis IX of France, right? Excuse me, against the
Mhm.
Hafsid dynasty, who were Sunni Muslims. All right, identify themselves as Berbers, but they were not Berbers. They were Arabs. They were nomadic Berbers. Very important for you to understand that. But for you to understand that, you must go back to the original crusade, which was called the First Crusade, because you can't have an eighth crusade till you go to the First Crusade. And the First Crusade was established by Godfrey of Bouillon, who was a Roman Catholic king of Jerusalem. He wasn't a de jure king; he was a de facto king. All right. So let's go back to the First Crusade, because in order for us to understand the eighth, we have to understand the first. All right. Just briefly. Because who was the first crusade against? All right. Who was the first crusade against? That's all I want to know. That's all we want to know. Who are the belligerents in this campaign, in these campaigns? Just read the first paragraph.
The First Crusade, 1096-1099, was the first of a series of religious wars or crusades initiated, supported, and at times directed by the Latin Church in the Middle Ages. The objective was the recovery of the Holy Land from Islamic rule. Right, Jerusalem had been under Muslim rule for hundreds of years. By the 11th century, the Seljuk takeover of the region threatened local Christian populations, pilgrimages from the West, and the Byzantine Empire itself.
That's fine. So the first crusade was against Seljuks who took over the region. All right. Very important for you to understand that, because from the first crusade to the eighth crusade, they were fighting against Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Very important. So let's look at who. Let's go check out Lord, well, no, not there. But the Hafsids. Who are the Hafsids? First, the Seljuks. Let's look at the Seljuks first. Who are the Seljuks that were warned against the rulers of Jerusalem, which was Godfrey the fifth kind of, which was what was his name? Godfrey of Bouillon. He was the first king of Jerusalem. All right. He didn't wear a crown because the crown was preserved for the one who was claimed to be crucified, which is a potential story. We ain't got time to go into that because we already explained that in prior lessons. But just for the sake of the argument, we're talking about the belligerents in this particular war called the First Crusade War, which was based upon the Seljuk Empire or the Great Seljuk Empire. And who were these people? Read it, Archbishop. Just the first sentence. That's all we need, the first sentence.
The Seljuk Empire, or the Great Seljuk Empire, was a high medieval, culturally Turco-Persian Sunni Muslim empire, established and ruled by the Kenik branch of the Ulkus Turks.
Okay, so the First Crusade was based upon Sunni Muslims, right? Sunni Muslims warring against the kings of England. All right, because we know the kings of England was Edward the First. Edward the First was warring against Frankish kings. We have qualified in a second, but the First Crusade was based upon Sunni Muslims. So if the First Crusade was based upon Sunni Muslims, which were called the Seljuk Empire, let's go back to the Eighth Crusade and see who they was warring against. It said what? The Hafsid.
Hmm?
Right, let's go back. Eighth Crusade.
Hafsid.
It says the Eighth Crusade was the second crusade launched by Louis IX of France. This one against the Hafsid dynasty. So who is the Hafsid dynasty in the Eighth Crusade? Let's just take a look at them. We need to know who we're talking about, because these are not Berbers. Read it.
It said the Hafsids were a Sunni Muslim dynasty of Berber descent who ruled Africa, modern-day Tunisia, western Libya, and eastern Algeria from 1229 to 1574.
Okay, so when we read this, they would say that, well, we were Berbers. No, we're not Berbers. You got nomadic Berbers, and you got the true Berbers. The nomadic Berbers are the Arabs, and the true Berbers are those Anglo-Saxon Berbers. Let's prove it. Hafsids were a Sunni Muslim, just like the Seljuks were Sunni Muslims, all right? They say or claim that the Hafsids descended down from Berber descent, who ruled Africa and modern day Tunisia, Western Libya, and Eastern Algeria. All right, that's what they're trying to say. But it said the Hafsids were Sunni Muslims. We're not Sunni Muslims. The Hafsids are Sunni Muslims who are descended down from what? The Seljuks. Let's prove it. Let's go back to let's go to Berbers. Read this first paragraph right here. Start from one second. Right here, Islam.
Says Islam later provided the ideological stimulus for the rise of fresh Berber empires, the Almoravids, the Almohads in the 11th to 13th centuries. Their Berber successors, the Marinids, the Zionids, and the Hafsids, continued to rule until the 16th century. From the 16th century onward, the process continued in the absence of Berber dynasties in Morocco. They were replaced by Arabs claiming descent from the Islamic prophet Muhammad.
Okay, so we've seen a transition from the true Berbers, all right, to those who mix with us, all right, called the Almorid, the Almohid, on to the Marines, Zionids, and the Hafsids, all right, which were descendants of the Arabs, because Arabs and Berbers were two distinct people. Very important to understand that because Berbers are of Afro-Asiatic descent. Very important. Berbers are of Afro-Asiatic descent. How do we know it? Let's go back to the case law. In Ray versus Hamad Hassan. And we're not talking about over there in Africa, Europe, and Asia. We're talking about right here. We're making the distinction between Berbers and Arabs right here. We are Anglo-Saxon Berbers. We're not Moorish or Arabs. We are Anglo-Saxon Berbers, not based off some wish, not based off some belief, but based off a body of politics that was here, that was established, all right, based off their confirmation, not our confirmation, their confirmation based off their enlightenment, which came from us. All right, read this first paragraph, Archbishop.
It says to summarize the approach which must be followed in deciding whether a particular person applying for citizenship is a white person within the meaning of the statute as interpreted by the Supreme Court. It is necessary to determine first the particular group or racial subdivision to which the individual belongs. In practical effect, proof of this fact is a matter of genealogy. An individual who presents an aberration from the color of skin, that means a difference, of the group of which he is a member, such as light-skinned Chinese or Japanese or dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, does not...
Read that again. They said dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon. It didn't say white-skinned Anglo-Saxon. It said dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon. So if they said dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, they're talking about that brother hanging out, as explained in that Doomsday abbreviator. All right? And we understand why he was hanging on, because he was subject to the land as a result of what Dred Scott said about the status of dark-skinned Anglo-Saxons. They became slaves by way of the Norman conquest, all the way up till King George III, who then passed it to the colonies, who also incorporated slavery into their policies. All right. And why they did it is because They were the ones enslaved in the Dark Ages, and the Dred Scott, in this case, just proved it. The dark-skinned Anglo-Saxons, based upon being members of a group, is not based off of color or a test of the skin. It's based off genealogy,
Genealogy.
ancestry, nationality. So, Brother Truth, you can't claim to be an Englishman if you don't denote to the nationality of the ethnic group. You have to prove that you are, in fact, a member of that group. You can't
Mhm.
prove that. We can. We're showing you all the evidence to support our conclusion. Continue to read.
All right, it says, so like it says, an individual presents an aberration from the color of skin of the group of which he is a member, such as a light-skinned Chinese or Japanese or dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, does not thereby acquire a different status under the act from other members of his group. Of course, when an individual applying for citizenship has a skin of a different color than is usual for the members of the group for which he claims to come, a strong burden of proof then rests upon him to show by the usual methods of proving genealogy that he is in fact a member of that group. After the individual have been traced into his group, the second question which the court must answer is whether the members of the group as a whole are white persons, as Congress understood the term in 1790 when it first enacted the statute. In deciding this latter question, the test is not how the group in question would be classified by ethnologists who have made a study of racial origins, but rather what groups of peoples then living in 1790 with characteristics then existing were intended by Congress to be classified as white persons. Applying these principles, the court finds that petitioner is an Arab, and the Arabs are not white persons within the meaning of the act.
And that's based upon the color of skin. We ain't talking about the color of skin. We're talking about the nationality and the distinction of the nationality based upon the color of skin. They gave the example of dark skin. First upon what they said the elite was, which was white-skinned Anglo-Saxon Protestant, which were descended down from the colonies who incorporated laws to keep us black-skinned Anglo-Saxon and the slavery going all the way back to the Norman conquest, because the recording was in the Doomsday Book. Why? Because the recording of the Doomsday Book were not just the land property, but the movable property such as cattle or chattel. All right, y'all must understand what's going on. We bringing it to you. Let's prove it. All right, let's go here. Prove again, once again, that we are not Arabs. We are Berbers. Let's prove it. In closing, Berbers and Arabs, tracing genetic diversity and history of southern Tunisia through genome-wide analysis. So we're talking about that Ipswich man, right? From found in coming from Tunisia, right, to England, Great Britain, right, and was associated in a territory where our king, King Edgar the Peaceful, was situated and was ruling at his highest height. Okay, so why is this man associated with a reformed monastery movement that we are the revitalization of that movement, called the Third Temple English Church of England? And I'm the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, who was ruling Ipswich at that particular time, where that African descendant claimed to be buried at. Okay, and we know that they were African, Miss Nominally. They were dark skinned because we know Alfred the Great and his wife and his children were dark skinned based upon the complexion of their skin. We know we go back to Albion, we see there were giants in those days and they were dark skinned based upon our complexion. So we must make the realization, going back to the time immemorial, of who and truly are, because Arabs are not dark skinned. Arabs are light skinned. All right, Berbers are dark skinned, and we're making a distinction between Berbers and Arabs. All right, very important, because we know that Northmen were barbaric, just like Arabs are barbaric. That's why they were called barbarians. They were always warring. We can tell this through the Crusades. From
Crusades,
the
they love
first
fighting.
crusade to the ninth crusade, who were the English Anglo-Saxon Berbers warring with? Arabs.
Arab,
Not just Arab, but we was defending off Vikings. So we were fighting off both of y'all.
everybody.
Everybody, and you still can't take us down. Let's prove it. Berbers and Arabs, tracing the genetic diversity history in southern Tunisia. Just hit just read the abstract.
It says the objective. Tunisia has been a crossroads for people from Africa, Europe, and the Middle East since prehistoric times.
Mm.
At present, it is inhabited by two main ethnic groups, Arabs and Berbers, and several minorities.
Hold on now. If it's only two ethnic groups, Arabs and Berbers, in the case law just said dark-skinned Berbers versus a light-skinned Arab trying to classify as white skin. That's crazy. An Arab trying to qualify as white person, not a black person, but the example they gave of a black person was an Anglo-Saxon Berber. That's crazy. That's beautiful right there. All right, continue.
And several minorities. This study aims to advance knowledge regarding their genetic structure using new population samplings and a genome-wide approach. Materials and methods. We investigated genomic variation, estimated ancestry components, and dated admixture events in 3 Berber and 2 Arab populations from southern Tunisia, mining a data set including Middle Eastern, Sub-Saharan, and European populations. Results. Differences in the proportion of North African, Arabian, and European ancestries and the varying impact of admixture and isolation determine significant heterogeneity in the genetic structure of southern Tunisian populations. Admixture time estimates show a multi-layer pattern of admixture events involving both ethno-linguistic groups, which started around the mid 11th century and lasted for nearly 5 centuries. Discussion. Our study provides evidence that the relationships between genetic and cultural diversity of old and new inhabitants of North Africa and southern Tunisia follow different patterns. The Berbers seem to have preserved a significant part of their common genomic heritage despite Islamization, Arab cultural influence, and linguistic diversity. Compared to Morocco and Algeria, southern Tunisia Arabs have retained a higher level of Arabian ancestry. This is more evident in the semi-nomad Arabia, who have kept their original Bedouin lifestyle, than in the population from Dals, who have undergone multiple events of stratification and admixture.
So as they can say, the Arabs are nomadic Berbers, and the actual Berbers were those who were more civilized, all right? More culture, more, matter of fact, let's get the qualifier right here, all right? This is another genetic test dealing with genetic characteristics, okay? The genetic characteristics of an Arab, of a Tunisian Berber. Let's read this and close them.
It says the abstract.
I'm sorry.
It said blood samples from 120 Tunisian Berbers of Galala village were typed for GM and KM immunoglobulin allotypes alpha 1 anti-trispin variants, trispin variants in ABO blood groups. The results were compared with those of other Berber groups. To combine data considered in the light of sociological, historical, and paleontological data support the hypothesis that the Berbers are native to North Africa and their ancestors, the first modern man Homo sapiens of North Africa, were the founders of the European populations. The ancestors of the Berbers could have been an intermediate population between Homo sapiens from Europe and from South Africa.
Okay, so that's genetic study did on the genetics of our ancestors who are Berbers. Now listen to what they say in 1911 encyclopedia, and they pretty much gonna say the same thing. In closing, this is one paragraph, Archbishop.
It says the Arab has built his social structure on the Quran, which inculcates absolutism, aristocracy, theocracy. The Berber, despite his nominal Mohammedanism, is a democrat with his Jama or Witimat and his Kanun or unwritten code, the Magna Carta, of the individual's liberties as opposed to the community's good.
Okay, so here we have two terms. Either we want to use Witimat, Jimna, or Kanun, which is the Magna Carta. We prefer the Magna Carta and Witimat because we know the Encyclopedia Britannica is talking about Anglo-Saxon Berbers, because we know the government of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers was Witimat. And we know the Arabs government is called Jimna or their code of law was called Qanun. All right. So we are Anglo-Saxon Berbers. How we know it? Let's qualify even more. All right. In closing, somebody else made a reference to it. Here's the guy. In closing. Sure it is. A book by H. King, Man's Past and Present. A.H. King, Man's Past and Present. And look what he read. Look what he wrote. Same thing they said in 1911 Wikipedia. Can you see that?
Yep. It says, the Berber, on the contrary, loves the sheltering woodlands. He is essentially a Highlander who carefully tills the forest glades, settles in permanent homes, and often develops flourishing industries. Arab society is feudal and theocratic, ruled by a despotic sheikh, while the Berber, with his Jemma or his Witenmat and his Qanun or unwritten code, feels himself a freeman. And it may well have been this democratic spirit, inherited by his European descendants, that enabled the Western nations to take the lead in the onward movement of humanity.
Did you hear that, Archbishop?
So pretty much telling you, and what has been inherited, the movement of humanity, is the English history or the English language, the English law, the Magna Carta. Mm-hmm. The Arab, again, is a fanatic, ever to be feared, because he blindly obeys the will of Allah proclaimed by his prophets, Murabouts, and Mahdis. But the Berber, a born skeptic, looks askance at theological dogmas. An unconscious philosopher, he is far less of a fatalist than his Semitic neighbor, who associates with Allah countless demons and jinns in the government of the world.
Okay, so y'all better listen. Somebody else wrote a book and clarified what the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica said. And we know that the Encyclopedia Britannica was actually created in Edinburgh, Scotland. Now, who is the author who wrote this book, who said exactly what the Encyclopedia Britannica said? Let's see, real quick. And closing. Augustine Henry King, or H. King, same person. This is the gentleman who wrote this book.
I said, so Augustus Henry King was an Irish Roman Catholic journalist and linguist known for his ethnological writings.
And what writing we talking about? Let's just go to the writing. Man's Past and Present. Man's Past and Present. He wrote it and said exactly what the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica said about the Berbers. Okay? Mm-hmm. And the Berbers government was that of the Anglo-Saxon government, which was called Witenmat or Witten. So in closing, all right, we have to understand that freeholders or the freemen were the ones who inhabited the land prior to the Norman conquest. All right? Prior to the Norman conquest. And as a result of that, it fell under what we call the King's Land. All right? Terror regions, which we'll close out on now. All right? This is the last thing we're going to show. We're going back to talking about the William the Conqueror. You know, prior to William the Conqueror invaded England, we was doing good. When they invaded us, then came the Northmen. The Northmen were the ones who descended down from the Carolingians and the Merovingians, who were warned what the kings of Wessex, because the kings of Wessex were aligned with the Plantagenet crown, because we know William the Conqueror descended from the House of Normandy, and the House of Normandy was fighting against the Plantagenet crown, who we are descendants of here in this present day. All right. I, King Jefferson, descendant of Godfrey the Fifth, Count of Anjou, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. And the ruler of Jerusalem were the ones who were fighting the Crusade from the first Crusade to the Eighth Crusade. And the Eighth Crusade ended with Edward the First. And when they ended that crusade, they brought back an African man from Tunis. And we know Tunis were Berbers, not Arabs, but Berbers. And when they went over to help our brothers who are Berbers, they was helping them and fighting them against Arabs who invaded that land. Who were those Arabs? The Seljuks and the Hafsids, who were nothing more than Sunni Muslims. Okay? I didn't say that. The evidence proved that. So in closing, let's just deal with the reason why we here at the Third Temple Church do what we do in regards to protecting the estate of our heirs that was taken all the way back to the Norman Conquest and to the present day, as being explained by Brother Truth. Okay? You are not a true brother. All right? You need to stop lying to the people. All right? Because all the people you got following him in ignorance, if imagine what the people who is, I always say, it's better for you to not know this than to know this and not follow it. Okay? Once again, because you have no excuse once you know this. Those who don't know this have an excuse, because ignorant, out of mind, out of sight. Brother Truth claimed to know this, so he will be judged more strictly. Okay? Members of the Third Temple Church of England and those who are on the platform, you will be judged more strictly. I gave a command, as Archbishop noted, that I asked everyone who watched these last lessons to put their name and to be recorded in the Berbers tape. Nobody put their name there but as Archbishop Belmont. You can't even follow simple instructions. So how you expect your ancestors to follow instructions that they preserve to save y'all asses? It's not going to be done. I'm not going to do it. Let's read what they're in closing. This is what our ancestors have preserved to us as a result of crown land. All right, read it, Archbishop.
It says, immediately following the Norman conquest of 1066, all land in England was claimed by King William the Conqueror as his absolute title by allodial right, being the commencement of the royal demesne, also known as the crown land. The king made grants of very large tracts of land under various forms of feudal tenure from his demesne, generally in the form of feudal baronies. The land not so enfeoffed, for example, royal manors administered by royal stewards and royal hunting forces, thus remained within the royal demesne. In the Domesday Book of 1086, this land is referred to as the Terra Regis, literally the king's land. And in the English common law, the term ancient demesne refers to the land that was held by the crown at the time of the Domesday Book.
Okay, so let's go right here in this picture and see who was the one recorded in that Doomsday Book, based upon the depiction we see here in closing. You see an African hanging on for dear life.
I could stand for identity, because that's what we was losing. We was losing our identity.
Hanging on for dear life. Terra Regis, King's Land. Ain't no white person hanging on that eye. It's an Asiatic brother hanging on that eye. A melanated brother hanging on that eye. And we know melanated, African, or black is not a proper identity, because you just can't claim to be part of a nationality or ethnic group based upon a color of skin. Okay? You must be a part of that body of politics. You must be considered a part of that group. And groups stay together. Groups stick together. We are a family here. All right? We are a government protected by a government. How we know? Because that's how our ancestors established it, going back to the Clarendon Constitution. So you are to hang on for dear life as a result of the allodial titles that has to be that are reserved for who? Heirs. And with this, I'll close out on. Let me just go there. Crown land. Read Crown Land and we'll close out.
Crown land, sometimes spelled crownland, also known as royal domain, is a territorial area belonging to the monarch who personifies the crown. It is the equivalent of an entailed estate and passes with the monarchy, being inseparable from it. Today, in Commonwealth realms, crown land is considered public land and is apart from the monarch's private estate.
Okay, so Crown Land or Royal Domain or Damsnay, which was called the Doomsday Book. Okay, the Doomsday Book is based upon the Royal Domain or Damsnay, if I'm pronouncing it right, which is entail estate, right? So the Crown Land is entail estate, which passes with the monarch, being inseparable from it. So let's go back to Damsnay in closing. And this is the last thing I'll show. It just said William the Conqueror took all the land under assumed Lolio title and commencement of the royal domain, also called Crown Land. But he did it by what we call prescription. You notice when we read the Dred Scott case, it spoke about prescription. Let's read prescription, and that'll be the last thing I'll show. Prescription of sovereignty. Everybody claimed to be sovereign under prescription, but now it's being attested. It's being challenged now. Brother Truth, your so-called sovereignty that you claim to be giving other people is being tested now. You're going to have to prove that, buddy. Read this last definition, Archbishop.
Prescription. International law is sovereignty's transfer of a territory by the open encroachment by the new sovereign upon the territory for a prolonged period of time, acting as the sovereign without protest or other contest by the original sovereign. It is analogous to the common law doctrine of easement by prescription for private real estate.
Okay, so easement by prescription is a result, is what Brother Truth, this is what you're doing. This is what everyone's doing in regards to your right to some type of interest in some property. Not an equitable interest, but a legal interest, which is by easement, right? Easement by way of prescription. What is it? And we'll close out on that.
An easement is a non-possessory right to use and to enter to the real property of another without possessing it. It is the best typified in a right of way which one landowner, A, may enjoy over the land of another, B. An easement is a property right and type of incorporeal property in itself at common law in most jurisdictions.
Okay, so an easement is a non-possessory right to use and enter onto real property of another without possessing it. Okay, so just because you're using it, do not mean that you own it. Okay, just because you're using the laws, just because you're using the history, just because you're using the customs, just because you're using the identity, don't mean that it belongs to you. All right, Brother Truth. All right, Scottish people, Ireland, Moors, whoever you are, you must have the laws of your nation protecting you and recognized by a foreign nation who asserted your laws by what we call prescription. All right, a non-possessory use and something that do not belong to you. Who does it belong to? Us. And guess what? We're coming for it. And with that, I'll close out and leave our Archbishop with the closing remarks.
But there you have it, brothers and sisters. Once again, the king has brought a marvelous lesson as part 3 to verify and show you that the Anglo-Saxon Berbers are the free men of these estates that many people today are claiming to have a so-called ownership or right to based off of their religious belief. Because many of the people over here are operating based off of belief system, not really backed or able to utilize in the court of law.
We good.
Can you hear me now?
You hear
All
now?
right, so once again, you have brothers and sisters. who are utilizing a belief system as their claim of evidence for them to have some type of so-called possessory right over here in America, which we know is technically crown land. The only people who do truly have a right to these lands that have technically been infiltrated, going all the way back to time immemorial, are Berbers, in this sense, Anglo-Saxon Berbers. And from what the king have verified and proved without a shadow of a doubt that we are those people that seem to be, we are those people that seems like the whole world is trying to forget about, is because we are their forebears. It's like said, mom and dad have finally returned home, and for us to see how our home has pretty much been destroyed by those who come from us, we're upset. And not only are we upset, but they don't want to relinquish what is actually not rightfully theirs. So therefore, we can bring harmony and stability back onto this earthly plane. And like the king said, it's those who look just like us who is causing us this downfall. It is those who look like us who have our communities in shambles like this. It is those who, like us, who are constantly trying to make a profit off of the information that's supposed to have been set for our salvation. And instead for them bringing it and interpreting it in a way for them folks to find themselves coming back into the church, back into the kingdom accordingly, they're utilizing it for their own selfish, egotistical use and benefit. And like the king said, the day of judgment is coming for you, because what you reap, you must sow. And with that being said, we love you. For those of you who really truly want to help support us, like I said, your donations is greatly appreciated, because it takes finance to uplift the nation. And in the meantime, while the king is doing the great work within the courtrooms, like I said, we need all decks on hand. If you don't want to help and contribute to this English intellectual movement, which is technically the movement of salvation for the earthly plane, we will remember you. Your fate has been sealed. Those who can contribute monetarily, share the videos, tell others about us. Word of mouth is good. Anything to get the consciousness or to get our words out there into the spaces that need to hear it the most. And like we said, we're really here for you, and for us to be able to help you, you must help us do our earthly mission.
Yes. Also, I'd just like to once again reiterate that all those who claim to be cognate and conscious, you need to go to your teachers and see if they're actually teaching what you should be teaching. Brother Truth, once again, our job is not to talk bad about you, but to correct you and to correct your ways. If you are a true brother, as your name denotes to, then you have no problem coming on to our platform and discussing this matter like a true Englishman. All right. If not, then you are a wolf from sheep clothing, and we will once again come for you. We are coming for you. All right. So with that, we're going to greet you as we meet you, and that's always in peace. Peace.